I call the order of the work session, Wilsonville City Council of April 6, 2026 at 5 p.m. I'll start by asking council members for review of the agenda and items on consent. Any issues at all? Okay. Any councilor concerns? Okay. Turning now to our work session, Clackamas County Sheriff's Office Finance Update.
I'm going to kind of tee this up, Mayor and Council. I am Gina Troja, I'm the city manager. I'm going to introduce Patrick, and then I'm going to have him give a brief presentation. The item before you tonight is related to an unanticipated change in the city's law enforcement contract with the Sheriff's Office. This change results in an increase to the current fiscal year contract that we have. That increase will be coming forward to the council in your April 20th council meeting as part of a budget supplemental. So in preparation for that budget supplemental that you will see in April, we asked that Patrick be here. He'll introduce himself, but to give a little bit of background and context for why we are seeing that increase this year. And then he'll talk a little bit about moving forward to the next fiscal year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Gina. Good evening, Mayor O'Neill and Council. My name is Patrick Williams. I'm the Finance and Business Services Manager for the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. I'm here to explain the overage in this year's actual cost that we've billed the city and provide you some context on why that happened and what we've done to fix it moving forward. The most recent labor contract we have with the Peace Officers Association includes a complex set of incentive payments depending on a lot of different factors, including seniority, educational attainment, special unit assignments like search and rescue, dive, SWAT, things like that, and also the certifications that they've obtained. The incentive structure is unique to each individual deputy. So it's not a blanket that we can apply to all patrol deputies, all jail deputies, or even Wilsonville patrol deputies and Happy Valley patrol deputies and Clackamas County patrol deputies. When that was implemented, and due to the complexity of it, our budgeting software did not capture all of those incentive payments. So, as I think you're aware, we bill actual personnel costs and budgeted materials and services costs to the city monthly. So, while the deputies were getting paid for their incentive payments, they were not accurately budgeted for in this fiscal year. As a result of that, it was kind of unusual for the city of Wilsonville in that many patrol deputies were out on leave for an extended period of time. And if a patrol deputy is out on leave for 30 days or more than 30 days, on the 31st day, Clackamas County absorbs those costs. Those costs are not passed on to the city. However, the result of those patrol deputies being out created more overtime for coverage within the city. So the overtime amount, which is really if you look at the raw numbers, that's the pretty much the portion of what the overage is and what will be asked for in a supplemental budget in the future. However, those were exacerbated a bit because of the incentive pays not captured, including in that overtime, and the savings in the straight time were not as big as they could have been because of the incentive pays related to those. And I know that's labor contract language and fairly complicated. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that. The problem has been resolved moving forward. We worked with our IT team that actually programs the incentive pays into our budgeting software. It's much more accurate. It will be precise in next year and moving forward. We really regret the error. It caused us some issues with our board where we had to go in front of them and ask for $4 million. And the method, an additional $4 million in supplemental this year to cover our additional costs after keeping 40 positions open and cutting our overtime and everything. So it was an impact for everyone, but we invested the time to, like I said, have more precision and accuracy in future budgets.
If you don't mind, let me tell you what the dollar amount is, because somebody's probably going to ask that question. So it's $297,000 that you will be seeing in your budget supplemental at the next council meeting. And I also want to, it might be worthwhile to bring up that there are 2 other cities that contract with the sheriff's office for law enforcement services. They are also faced with the same increase, and that is the city of Happy Valley and the city of Estacada.
And what, what do we envision could be the potential future result in next year's budget? How
Do you want-
dramatic of a change are we?
So the change in next year's budget, so the impact that you're seeing obviously this year will carry over to next year. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
The next budget.
It's about an 8% increase from this current, including this new $297,000 to what next year's budget is going to be. We will be bringing that before the Budget Committee, and you'll be able to have a conversation about what that item is at that time. Is that,
Right.
is that accurate,
That's
Patrick?
correct, and that 8% is not solely related to increases in personnel costs. Our CCOM, which is our 911 system, and our C800, which is our radio system with the towers and the maintenance and the use of that, those costs have gone up fairly substantially. Other costs have gone up. And you can get into the details when you talk about it next year. It's not solely related to the incentive pays. There are other factors related to that too.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Skoll?
So the overrun of 297, that's to cover what we've missed for the first 3 months and then catching up or basically taking care of business for the rest of the year?
No, the 297 is actually for the entire year.
It's for the,
The
okay, yeah,
projected overage for the entire year.
so, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the work session is the Town Center Urban Renewal feasibility.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Mayor O'Neill and City Council, it's my pleasure to be here again tonight. My name is Matt Lorenzen. I'm the city's Economic Development Manager, and I'm joined virtually by Nick Papanuck of Tiberius Solutions, our consultant on this project. We want to keep our presentation brief to allow for as much time as possible for questions and discussion. During our last presentation on March 16th, the council reviewed 2 scenarios, a scenario based on a 10% redevelopment acreage reduction and a 25% reduction scenario. Those scenarios also included additional adjustments to development assumptions, which were discussed during that meeting and also in the staff report, and I've included the slide again for summary purposes. At the conclusion of last meeting, the council requested to see a third scenario, a 17.5% reduction in redevelopment acreage to split the difference between the 2 scenarios presented. I do have those figures ready to present and discuss with you this evening. Of course, they're in the staff report as well. Before doing so, I'd like to reiterate a point I made during the recent meeting, because I feel it's worth reiterating. These scenarios represent financial plans rather than a development plan. The development plan has been in place since 2019. The town center zone, a roughly 150-acre area, allows for 2 to 5-story buildings to be constructed. Such buildings can be occupied by a mix of uses, including multifamily residential, townhouses, condos, commercial offices, retail stores, restaurants, and other uses. That has remained unchanged and has been consistent since 2019. The scenarios we're reviewing here are about financial planning rather than land use planning. Yes, we are estimating how many 2 to 5 story buildings we think might be constructed during a roughly 30-year period throughout the town center area. We're also asking what will be in those buildings. How much land will those new buildings consume? How much parking will they build on site? What will the market demand, and what will developers build? We ask all these questions in order to estimate the ultimate question when it comes to urban renewal. How much tax revenue will new development produce? And how much does the city need to invest in order to ensure the town center area functions well and serves Wilsonville residents in a way that brings them joy rather than frustration? For this area to work the way it was planned, critical investments are needed for roads, utilities, intersection improvements, parks and public gathering spaces, vehicle parking, a bridge over I-5, and other projects that ensure this area is really a healthy beating heart of Wilsonville and not a failing organ. With that preface, let's get into the numbers. On March 16th, we saw 2 revised development and financial forecasts. Tonight, we are looking at a third alternative. This new scenario assumes 17.5% less development than was forecasted in 2023. Or stated differently, this scenario assumes about 35% of the planning area will redevelop over 30 years, spurred by urban renewal investments. This scenario has a financial capacity, also called maximum indebtedness, of $85 million, and that's stated in 2026 dollars. We discussed in the March meeting that approximately $107.6 million are needed to complete all of the projects included in the 2023 feasibility study. In other words, all 3 scenarios being considered tonight will have insufficient financial capacity to complete the full slate of projects. But not to worry. This is not uncommon with urban renewal planning. Projects can be selected and completed over time as funding opportunity, partnerships, and council priorities dictate. As long as a majority of projects can be completed, we are not at great risk of underfunding the investments needed for this area. Still, this begs the question, is there a scenario in which all the projects could be completed if a future council desires it, the community supports it, economic conditions allow for it, and development activity justifies it? In short, yes, it's possible, but it would require what's called a substantial amendment, and that's a statutory term. Probably about 10 to 15 years from now, give or take. If financial capacity were to be increased, it would have to be done by ordinance and subject to public hearings. In any case, the spending cap for the area could not be increased more than 20% above the original financial capacity. If Measure 3-632 passes this May, such an amendment would also be subject to a binding public vote. It's very difficult to predict with precision which of the scenarios presented tonight would be sufficient to fund all projects, assuming a 20% increase to funding capacity. As such, staff only offers some very basic guidance, knowing that macro and microeconomic conditions will change in the next decade or 2. So as you see on the screen, we estimate that scenario 1 would be likely sufficient if that 20% increase were made at some point in the future. Scenario 2, likely insufficient, and scenario 3, possibly sufficient. It's a lot to consider, and ultimately a policy decision, as we can't see the future, but we do know a few things with certainty. The community wants a downtown with shops, restaurants, food carts, some character, a main street, something that makes us all want to stay right here in Wilsonville rather than leave to spend our leisure time elsewhere. The community wants better traffic flow, sufficient parking for vehicles and residents, and a safer route for those crossing town to access town center. There may be disagreements about how much housing is needed, but there seems to be consensus that housing affordability is important. The best way to ensure our businesses stay in business and the best way to ensure housing affordability is to build housing. When supply exceeds demand, prices fall. We know that. Thank you for indulging me on these last points. I hope I don't overstep. As Economic Development Manager, part of my role is to ensure that Wilsonville's economic and fiscal future is healthy. There's no better way to do this than to catalyze the development of new buildings where today there are vacant relics of the past and vast unused parking fields. When the city maximizes the utility of its limited land supply, we ensure we are passing revenue-generating assets along to future generations rather than sprawling liabilities. The existing development pattern was popular for a time, but it provides relatively little value to the city, to the community. Multi-story mixed-use business districts with housing integrated, also known as downtowns, in city after city after city of every size, have proven to be the best and most enduring way to accomplish community development and economic development simultaneously. With that, I look forward to your questions and your discussion this evening.
Council, questions? Councilor Cunningham.
Yeah, so as I've taken more time since the last meeting to digest these numbers and think about what they mean, and I understand that these are illustrative numbers. You know, the illustration paints a picture that's larger than what we promised. I stand by that. I know that we're looking at a financial plan here, but when that financial plan is underpinned by more than 2,000 residences, that's not the promise, that's not the plan. We're still not there. We're still not at the plan. The plan in 2019 was 1,600 residential units. The last mayor on her way out in December of 2024 sat here and told us all it's just 1,600 residential units over 30 to 40 years. What we're talking about here will fund more than 2,000 residential units in town center. And under the possibility of an amendment, if 3632 does not pass, the city council can just come in and just go ahead and just blow it up even bigger at a whim. It won't take another vote of the people to make that decision. The people have to make the final decision on this, and we shouldn't leave it up to 5 people to come in on a whim and just do what they will with it. So, to that point, I disagree with your view of downtowns. We're in the South Metro region. We're in a suburban community. Go to Westland. Do you see 5-story buildings hugging their downtown? No. Just drove through Canby the other day. I think there's 1 4-story building in their downtown area, and it's vibrant. There was a farmer's market out there last Thursday. It was a great day to be out there. It didn't require 5-story buildings. Recent development over in Sherwood outside of Langers, single-story commercial buildings. It can be done in these areas. I don't know why we're so in love and why we're chasing this dream of high-risk suburban mixed-use development. Because it is a high-risk building type in a suburban environment. Because we don't have built-in density. 1,500 to 2,500 people per acre in the nearby area is what's required for a good high-density mixed-use area. We don't have that here. We don't have it built in. So we're going to be promised that a catalyst will come in and it will push this thing through and it's going to make it happen. Well, it's high risk, and who's going to be paying for this? Who's going to be the risk on it? It's going to be our taxpayers. It's going to be our city. It's not going to be the developers. If it was the developers, if they were going to build right now, if they were already ready to build, they would have done it between 2019 and now. It's been 7 years. Nothing's happened. They're waiting on your tax money to build this. If that doesn't happen, I guess it won't happen. But the plan that's being provided here, these over 2,000 residential units that underpin redevelopment, that without it, we don't get the tax increment financing we need in the time allotted, the time being promised of 30 years. That means that either the tax increment financing will have to continue on for another 10 years, or 5 years, or 15 years, depending on how much of a shortfall it is, or we'll just have to develop taller, wider, more density. That's not what was promised in 2019. And revisiting my comments from last meeting on this, I know I said scenario 2, 25%. I would go with whatever number says 1,600 residential units of redevelopment. Those are my comments.
Counselor Skoll.
So in short, I pretty much disagree with Counselor Cunningham. The plan's a plan. This is a financial feasibility plan, and we've scaled it down almost 50% off of what the original plan was. And still, it comes in with likely sufficient financial capacity. I went through the plans, the 19 plan, the 23 plan, and the 24 plan, and I'm not seeing 2,000 units. And I'm still seeing the 1,600 units. And I'm also went through the other infrastructure plan, and the infrastructure plan was still listed at 1,600 or 1,682 units as they work through those financials and everything. So, basically the decisions that we make now from a financial perspective will give us the capacity to basically fit whatever the developers want to fit into that footprint over time. And this is going to be a 10-year, a 20-year, a 30-year plan, and there's going to be a half a dozen other councils that'll be able to basically review this and make decisions up or down in terms of where we need to go. My decision last council meeting was that I'd wish to advance the ballot, the urban renewal ballot to November 2026, and I'm going to stay with the 10% reduction. And the reason why I'm going to stay with that is I think that it's stated here it's likely sufficient capacity to get this started. And as we've discussed, you're not going to finance the whole program at one time. This will be incrementally financed, so it actually does reduce the risk over time. And it basically, it's not that we're going to go take out a $100 million loan right now and basically have to pay it back in the next 10 years. We're going to chunk that up over time per development on a development basis, and those will be paid. Those vehicles will be paid back over time, if I'm understanding how that works. And then secondarily to that, I'm a hard no on the 3-632. I think that actually limits our success and basically our flexibility to essentially put this program together. And I feel that we've come down off the high number. I think the high number was 4,100 in the feasibility study, and we're down to a 10% reduction now. I'm not sure how we got to that number, but with the measure 3-632 pending, if that was to pass, I think that we need to stay as close to that break-even line as possible to limit any further changes moving forward, because we would be limited in the amount of changes that we could make without going to ballot, and that wouldn't work very well. So, thank you.
Counselor Shevlin.
I appreciate the perspectives provided by both Councilor Skoll and Councilor Cunningham. I do take a bit of exception. We don't know how future councils will perform, but our city has a strong track record of very thoughtful council members and decisions made by councilors. So to project that future councilors will just make decisions on a whim and make decisions that would be poor for our community, both financially and for the infrastructure that we wish to build around the town center. I don't believe I'm being a Pollyanna. I believe that I can look at how we have performed historically as a council for our city and what we could expect in the future. I was not at the last meeting, although I watched in detail and read all of the information after the meeting. And my support is with the 10% reduction. Would be willing to look at this 17.5% reduction, but that does put us at more risk. So I'm leaning toward the 10%. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now I'll weigh in. I was the one that brought up the 17.5. It wasn't, you're politically correct to say council did, but it was my last minute thought just to see how it would look, not that I was leaning there. I was at the 10%, I remain at the 10%. I don't like that it possibly would be sufficient to me. I'm very conservative in thinking. I want to make sure we pick something that goes in November that is far more secure in an analysis for the future. I take exception a bit to the thought that somehow what we're talking about is a development promise. It's not anything to do with development. It's a financial analysis as far as I understand. Correct me, Mr. Lorenzen, if I'm wrong. But this, really what actually gets built is going to be decided in the future by any particular landowner, and a developer. And so these are just an exercise of scenarios as to what we could potentially anticipate would be the best financial use of the land. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, I think that that's right. I think I would add that while developers and landowners decide what will be built, of course, they have to do that within the parameters of the zoning. I know you realize that, but I just want to state
Right.
that for the record. I would also speak to a question that Councilor Skoll raised, or a comment rather, about the incremental nature of urban renewal and urban renewal debt capacity. The tables that you see have these sections below about debt availability. I've tried to think at length about how we can explain to the council and to the public about how urban renewal debt works, but maybe the best way to describe it is in negative terms. What it is not is a lump sum borrowing or deposit into the city's bank account that we're then bound to for 3 decades. Rather, development is what drives increment revenue, and revenue is what the bank is going to underwrite when they decide to give a loan. And in the early years of an urban renewal plan, when development is still getting up off the ground, our debt capacity is quite low. So you can see here, we're only forecasting about $3 million of debt capacity in the first few years, and then it increases, assuming that development increases over time. But one analogy perhaps is a line of credit, although that's not a perfect analogy, but you're approved at a certain amount and you can draw upon that over time as your financial capacity allows and as projects dictate. You don't get all of that money right up front, and so that's maybe one way to think about it. But each of these borrowings are separate loans, and they're financed and underwritten separately, all based on the revenue coming into the city. So Mayor, forgive me, I feel like I got off track there, but I wanted to speak to that point of risk and how it works from a mechanical perspective.
No, that was helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Cunningham.
So going to the tax increment financing. If a development is proposed, what is required for the city to sign off and allow it?
It would be the same, if I'm understanding your question, it would be the same as anywhere else in the city. Maybe I'm not understanding your question, but there would be a development application, which usually consists of 5 or 6 applications. It would go through land use review, it would go through building permit review. There would be a traffic impact analysis done to ensure that infrastructure is sufficient to support the development. I'm probably not capturing everything, but those are the types of things that are in place to make sure development happens in a healthy way.
Right. And the tax increment financing, that's meant to pay for infrastructure, correct?
It's largely infrastructure. Part of what was included in the project list was some real estate-related funds in the event that those were needed to catalyze development or create incentive programs or to support businesses in the existing town center with various tenant improvement grants. So I digress, but primarily infrastructure, Councilor Cunningham.
So a substantial portion of this tax increment financing is meant to develop infrastructure. And if the infrastructure needs to be in place for the city to approve a permit to develop the next building, and the next building after that, next building after that, as long as the infrastructure is there, the city would have no cause to say no to that next development, as I understand it. As long as it meets code, we have the infrastructure in place, or can have it within 2 years, is also my understanding, that the city would approve that next development. So my fear is that if we write the check for the original amount, let's say for $106 million, that's $106 million, so to speak, of infrastructure. I know there's some other things in there, but it's a substantial amount of infrastructure that we're going to build to support development, which could support 4,200 residential units. So we could hit that number had we gone that way. It is feasible. That's what we were told. Is that correct?
Yeah, one thing I tried to emphasize at the outset is that the zoning is for a mix of uses in 2 to 5 story buildings across a 150-acre area, and that's been consistent from the time of adoption in 2019 all the way to today. That hasn't changed and won't change in the future. Well, at least not as part of this item in front of the council.
Right, not this item, but the building height waivers that we are working to address that could have those buildings go well over 5 stories. Unlimited, as staff said, that there's no actual dictated cap on those. So as long as the check, the maximum indebtedness, so to speak, check is written to a certain number, we can build infrastructure to that point, which could support that number of residential units as outlined in these different options. So the point that I'm making here is that when I asked a few weeks ago, what assurance can we give to our citizens that we could cap out development in town center so it doesn't grow into this giant behemoth of development out of our control, I was told that we basically don't have a way to just say, hey, this zone is capped at this many residential units. And so we don't have a lot of tools there to cap that. One of the tools that we do have going through this exercise is that if there's not the infrastructure there to build the next building, then that next building doesn't get built. Seems to me like that's one of the few, if any, tools that we have to actually ensure that the promise of 1,600 residential units is kept. Now, if we were to say, let's say go with the 25% number, which is, I believe it was about just under 2,000 units. As you said, city council later could come along and they could do a substantial amendment to the plan. They could increase that number. If the citizens were begging for, hey, we didn't want just 1,600 residential units built here. We wanted, or 2,000, I guess, under the 25, but we wanted 2,500 or 3,000. So there are options later to audible on this. But my point is that if, as I've been told before, if the infrastructure exists or it can exist within 2 years, something that we would use tax increment financing to do, we'd be able to pull some more money because we can count on that tax increment coming in. Then what we're doing here, to me, is an exercise in how, it's not how low can we go, it's how high can we go. It's how much can we fund out infrastructure-wise to get to these levels of development. And if we don't have any other control mechanism on town center, this is how I see us keeping our promise to our citizens. And that's also to the idea, too, of I think that we had a substantial outreach on town center, given the recent town center focus groups survey results. I don't think we drew the right conclusions. I don't think 5-story buildings and hyperdensity was what our community was asking of us. That's reflected in the surveys.
Councilor Skoll.
So in the the total number of units, whether it be the 1,600 that's been planned or the feasibility units, it's a mix, right, of various different types of commercial, retail, and office and apartments, or not apartments, but residential.
Right, yeah, so it's tough to see the community, even the council, get stuck on this number of units issue, primarily because there is so much flexibility in the zoning code that allows for such a mix of uses, and that's by design. As the economy evolves, as the demand for space evolves, whether that's for office, which doesn't exist today, or whether that's for more retail, or whether that's for any of the different allowed uses within the zone, we expect, like I said, micro and macroeconomic conditions to evolve. And so it's possible that some of the space that we're forecasting to be in, let's just call it 2,000 housing units, it's possible that in 20 years we're seeing a demand for a different kind of space.
Right.
And that space gets allocated to a different type of development, a different type of use. So if I could go back in time, I probably would have not included unit counts in some of our original study, and that's not to be disingenuous, but that's because, or to deflect or in some way confuse the public. It's just that there's so much flexibility in the plan that what we do know is 2 to 5 story buildings across the town center area. Beyond that, as we look into the crystal ball, it's so hard to see.
So the calculus could be all over the place. I mean, it could change next year, it could change 5 years from now. It'll be based on market demand in combination with the way that we've subsequently planned it out at a high level.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to make it seem like we're just shooting in the dark. We're trying to be informed and educated and intelligent about what we're doing. At the same time, we're humble in the sense that we know that the future is going to be different than what we expect it to be.
So could we go back to the other sheet that shows the financials? Not that one. Yeah, right there. So my read on this, and maybe I'll help you out a little bit here, is I look at this as the city 401k and investing in property. You know, you start out in your early years and you invest a little here and you invest a little there and kind of build things up to see how it goes. And if you're successful, you continue to go down that path with different levels of investments and different types of investments. And as they grow, you compound off those investments. And that's the way I see this program. And you're going to have to vary your investment year to year, maybe every 5 years or whatever, in terms of how that works, splitting TIF investment versus SDCs. There's going to need to be some incentives, but it's going to be a situation where we at least have to start somewhere and get this kicked off and get things going, and then basically navigate the markets and all the other requirements over time and see how all that fits. And hopefully we gain, in years 11 through 20, we gain some pretty decent momentum, and we're able to, per what you're right up here, is that year 15 or 10 or 15, we're able to take another look and re-navigate or, put a new course in and see where we want to go from there. So I stick with the, let's get this on the ballot in November, and, I stick with the 10%, and I ask that we get this started.
Councilor Shevlin. Oh, well, hold on a minute, if you don't mind, hold on. Yield to the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify one point. That is not something that, it's come up today, so it's not something that I would say staff's totally prepared to talk about, but there are state statutes that limit the ability for cities to delay public infrastructure as a means of delaying development. So to the extent there are discussions about that, there are state statutes that directly address that issue. So if council would like further information about that, we can definitely provide that, but I do want to make council aware of that.
Thank you. Councilor Shevlin.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kyle Himman. I believe we can look at the approach to town center and tax increment financing in two different ways. One is a fear and worst-case scenario. It's going to be awful. People are going to be deciding at whim. And the implication there then is not making good decisions about the future of our city. Or we can make our decisions based on trust, trusting that we have a good plan. This is a feasibility study. We have the ability to move forward with a 10%, wherever we decide that we land, reduction in units. But I believe it's a good plan. Councilor Cunningham actually gave a good example of what I'm referring to. And I believe if I understood him correctly, he was talking about scenario 2 with about 1,983, or let's say 2,000 units. And then the community coming forward in the future and saying, oh, we need more than that. That's the work we do. That's the plan we use. So that we listen to our community. If they say, gosh, we need bigger. You know, whatever number we decided on, we're going to need bigger. That's the trust that I have in our community, in the leadership in our city council today, and in our future city councilors that are elected by our public. If we are transparent about this plan, if we make sure that our community understand what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it, then I truly believe, rather than basing decisions on fear, that we can base them on trust and how we go forward in the future. Thank you.
Councilor Cunningham.
I wanted to clarify that I'm not making any mention of delaying infrastructure, but I am saying that we do need to control our spending on infrastructure, because the state can't mandate that we come in and make expenditures, take your tax money and build extra roads that are counter to what your answers were on the town center survey, where you said that you don't care about housing in town center, where you said that that was the last priority on the list. So if we want to talk about trust, our citizens have told us what they want, what they expect, and I don't hear a lot of people listening. The trust would be that, Frog Pond had a minimum housing level in East and South of 1325 per state and regional standards and rules, and we're expecting to build over 1,600 units out there. That's not trust. That's not fulfilling the trust of our community. Our community is expecting moderate levels of growth. They're expecting a town center where they can go and enjoy it. They're not expecting an entire residential development Trojan horse to occur in the middle of the city. 150 acres with 1,600 residential units. Villebois is 480 acres with about, 2,600, 2,800 units? 2,600 units? I mean, we're talking multiples of density here, and I'm using the kind number of 1,600. I don't believe, just like Frog Pond, that we're going to stick to 1,600. I don't think the city ever has on a housing development. I don't think that Villebois was supposed to be 2,600. So we can talk about trust and all that, but I don't know that there's I don't know that what we're doing right now with the information that our citizens have given us, they have told us they don't care about housing. They don't want the traffic. The concerns were traffic and density and all these things. You don't see another downtown in the South Metro region that looks like these artist renditions that we've been handed after, as my wife and I talked about, what we thought we were looking at when we were at the park and we put some stickers on some things was a little bit of a facelift on our downtown to make it a nice place to be. This is a housing redevelopment being jammed into the middle of our city where we can least afford it. And we're just going to go ahead and be like, let's write a blank check for up to 2,400 residential units with only a 10% redevelopment acreage reduction. Like, that doesn't speak to trust to me.
Well, Councilor Cunningham, while I appreciate your views, I don't particularly agree of your interpretation of what all citizens want. I think we're a body of, let me finish if I can, 5 members of council, all that have members of the community that reach out to us, communicate with us, and tell us their concerns. We had a urban renewal district vote that happened in 2024 that only failed by 54 votes. We went back to work. We've made an adjustment with these three scenarios. The 10% one that I'm looking at seems to be a much different scenario than was presented in 2024. We've listened to the concerns of the community by potential heights in the buildings. We're trying to work within the framework of what the city attorney and our city managers propose as a way to examine that. I do know that citizens want a new town center. I'm very comfortable with that. And the delay that has happened has impacted our city, and our community is frustrated that we're taking too long. So we can only make the best scenario decision now, put it out to vote in November, because the citizens have called for a vote, and I'd like to honor that vote. And ultimately, they will need to decide. The other component is that this is talking about development that's going to span long before I'm alive, over 30, potentially 40 years. Who knows how this is going to be? And this is more about the future generations. And so there's only so much we can do to analyze what could happen from a financial feasibility examination. But what is the most important thing you do for a vision is pull the trigger and move forward. And so ultimately in November, I think we need to present a scenario that the community makes a decision about the future of our city. And scenario one, which we're on scenario 3, we can move to scenario 1 if we can.
Sure.
Is the one that I'm supporting. It sounded like I heard Councilor Shevlin and Councilor Skoll support. And I do appreciate Councilor Cunningham's thoughts. But ultimately, we have to make a decision, and that's what the community asked us to do when they voted us in office. Okay, Councilor Cunningham.
I'd like to clarify that at no point in time did I say all citizens, and that was the point that I was trying to correct you on as you were speaking. At no point in time did I say all citizens want this. I said we have received feedback from focus groups, from a survey that was, I think, one of the most responded to surveys that I've seen in our city. And it was very clear that housing was last on the list of things people were concerned with. So we have some data in front of us right now, fresh data in 2026 from a stale 7-year plan, and it's not saying keep moving forward with housing density. That's not what it says. And so to ignore that at this point in time, I think is folly. That vote could have lost by 1 vote, but it lost. Those are the rules of the game. Just because a tennis player wins more games during a match doesn't, if they lose the sets, they lose. That's the rules of the scoring of this. So 1 vote, 54 votes, 540 votes. And I'll remind you that this conversation around the actual amount of spending the city was willing to do on infrastructure to underwrite and underpin a substantial residential redevelopment well above what the plan initially promised, that was not in the public zeitgeist at that time. It was not being discussed. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help here. You guys, people are going to come out and say that I want to kill development and I don't want to see town center redevelop. I want to see town center redevelop just as much as anybody else. But if we put this number in front of voters in November, I can't help you.
Well, Councilor Cunningham, thank you for your clarification. Again, what I'm alluding to on that past vote is that that post reflected a higher unit density number portrayed in that prior urban renewal district, and that only failed by 54 votes. we have gone back and are looking at scenarios that are much different than what was originally has occurred. And I think that the council's hearing what the public wants. And ultimately, they'll tell us if we're right or wrong in November. But I'm all for moving forward on a November vote. I'm all for scenario one with a 10% redevelopment percentage. Anybody else? Okay. With that, I think you have what you need, Mr. Lorenzen. And by the way, you've been on this a lot longer than we've been on council. And I've watched you over the years, I've known you over the years, and it's not fun doing what you do. And you have led this discussion with grace and thoughtfulness. And someone that's been raised as a trial lawyer to rely on experts, you're the best we got. And I've heard a lot of great things outside our community about your expertise. Your commitment to this city means a lot to us as a council. Your thoughtfulness and your willingness to hear us out and create different scenarios that we ask. I appreciate that flexibility. But, you know, it must be hard. So, and often we don't get a chance to say this, but I want to thank you for all your efforts. I appreciate it. And the efforts you'll do moving forward for our city.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Mayor, and I'll just say that I want to agree with you that I think everyone in this room and everyone in this community wants the same thing, and that is for a vibrant, healthy community into the future. There's going to be disagreements about the finer points, but I care, and I know you care too.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is housing statutory compliance.
Good evening, Mayor O'Neill and City Councilors. I'm Kim Reibold, Senior Planner, and give me one moment here while I pull up my slideshow. All right, with me tonight is Heather Austin from 3J Consulting, and we are here to provide you with an update on the Housing Statutory Compliance Project, Part 1, which are draft code amendments related to our residential review process here in the city. Very briefly, we presented in your packet for this meeting draft code amendments that we will be moving forward for consideration based on input that we got from you and from City Council at work sessions back in December. The staff report highlights some of the key changes that we are looking at in this part of the process. I'm going to turn it over to Heather now to give us a bit of an overview of what is in here and what we hope to get from you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, Mayor O'Neill and the council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. We have just 3 simple objectives for our work session with you this evening. We want to provide some updated context for this project. A little bit of change has occurred at the state level since the last time we had a chance to come before you in work session. We want to present the development code amendments that were in your packet this evening and get any input from you as we move forward into getting ready for our public hearings for this project. So the project schedule on your screen is, as Planner Reibold said, is for phase 1 of this project. This is a 2-phase project that will occur all through the year of 2026. But for this first phase, we are doing some public outreach through your Let's Talk Wilsonville format online, as well as right now we've drafted the code amendments and we'd like to get feedback from this body. We met with your Planning Commission last week to receive feedback there as well. We will take all that feedback, we'll finalize the draft amendments and go to Planning Commission next month for a hearing, be before you in June of this year, I think very beginning of June, June 1st, And then we'll be ready to make these changes effective, compliant with state law on July 1st. So the project scope and goals, the change that's occurred since the last time we spoke with you is a legislative change. In the short session, the legislature did approve House Bill 4037. It has a couple of changes. It's meant to be accompany Senate Bill 974 that we spoke about at the last meeting, in that it's also required to be implemented by July 1st, 2026. It does change that Class 2 administrative review is required for all residential development applications that are meeting clear and objective standards. So as a reminder, Senate Bill 974 required that Class 2 administrative review for zone changes that increase density, plan developments, and variances and waivers to residential standards. So now the bucket of review types has been expanded to include anything that's a residential development that, again, doesn't need a waiver or adjustment or some other type of approval. The other thing that's different with HB 4037, we had discussion at this group and heard a clear preference for the 250-foot radius for public notice. So with HB 4037, the state was very clear that 100 feet is the limit for being able to mail public notice, and that is for applications of residential up to 500 units. Above 500, they allow up to 500 feet, but to keep consistency and make sure that there aren't any administrative errors on the staff side, we are recommending that using that 100-foot for all land use applications to make sure that we're meeting those requirements. And then the final thing that has changed with HB 4037 is that only an applicant will be able to now appeal a decision on a residential land use application. So right now, if someone receives notice or is in some way providing testimony on a residential application, even if that's a staff level decision that they've written in testimony, they then have a right to appeal that decision within a certain amount of time. That would go to, I believe, your development review board for appeal. After July 1 of this year, it will only be the applicant who applies who will have the right to appeal the staff level decision.
And I do want to clarify that that's, the appeals limitation is on the applications meeting the clear and objective standards. So there's a little bit of a Venn diagram going on with 4037 and 974. So I guess that.
Yeah, I'll just note that it's on here in sort of a lighter gray, but we spoke at our last meeting with you that in addition to the changes 4037 and Senate Bill 978 that we discussed, 974, we are also implementing that housing production strategy that you adopted last year, had a chance to go through that process. Action C requiring that, suggesting as a way to increase the possibility of housing development that you evaluate administrative review processes for residential development. So this project was already in the works in a way, and then the state requirement overlaps with that city process of looking at those standards.
All right.
I'll give it to Kim from here.
Thank you. So I do want to briefly just walk through highlights of what all is included in the set of amendments that are in your packet. The first couple of pieces really speak to that point that we just talked about on that last slide, which is making some changes to development code standards or the development code itself to better distinguish which applications are subject to clear and objective standards, which versus the ones that are reviewed using a discretionary process, and therefore we can still, the appeals process is different. So one of the amendments that we've done is to pull out waivers, which are currently housed in 4.118. That is a code section that is related to all planned development zones. We wanted to have the specificity related to waivers that makes that distinction that if you apply for a waiver, you are no longer on that clear and objective path. So that is very clear in our code now going forward, that a waiver still has appeal rights. So we've moved that to a new code section There aren't changes to the standards as it relates to what is included as being eligible to be waived. However, we do have some questions for you at the end. Keeping in mind that these waivers that historically have been reviewed and deliberated by the DRB would now have initial decisions made by staff. We also updated, completely rewrote section 4.022, which is about the appeals process. We wanted to be, it's very confusing when you're trying to tease apart the requirements of the different legislation, and we wanted to be as clear as we could about which applications allowed for appeals versus which ones don't. So we've tried to clarify that in the code, and we just added a little more clarity around how the appeals process works versus trying to interpret what some of those steps might be. So that was a complete rewrite that we did in coordination with the legal staff. Another topic that we took a look at based on your feedback in December was the modifications for what can qualify as an administrative review for all development types. I think there was this question that we had as we were doing our code analysis about the fact that we are now being pushed toward a process whereby a 50-unit subdivision has to be a staff-level administrative review, but if you're, let's say, an industrial development and you want to do a small accessory addition and that addition is more than 1,250 square feet, that application still has to go to DRB. And so we did get feedback that this was something that would be worth looking into. We suggested a limitation of 10,000 square feet to these changes, so increasing that from 1,250 square feet, but keeping the percentage limitation that is in the code so that, as you can see on the right side of the slide, if you had a 20,000 square foot building, you would have to go to DRB for anything over a 5,000 square foot increase. And so there's still a proportionate cap. The Planning Commission agreed with this number. Importantly, this is not applicable to new development. This is only for existing development or modifications to approved site plans or architectural plans. And so if you have any feedback on that number, we would be happy to hear it at the end of the presentation. Based on the direction we got at the December work sessions, we created an expedited process for annexation for residential development that is meeting a master plan that's been adopted. And so this is a process that is pretty similar to what we use in the Coffee Creek area for industrial development. This is not a requirement of the state statute, but really is looking at how do we better implement Action C in light of all the other changes we have to make to the residential development process. And so residential annexations would come straight to City Council for a hearing once we have a complete application without prior recommendation from the Development Review Board. And then a couple of other updates that are included in this package. We created some new definitions to help us better define what residential development consists of and what that review authority would be throughout the code. So instead of saying planning director or development review board every time, we created a definition for review authority. That way, that language can apply everywhere and it's not being too wordy in the code. We looked at the site design review section of the code, which is the part of the code that really speaks to things like landscaping materials, building materials, things more related to appearance of development. That language is arguably very subjective and discretionary, and because the state statute does not allow us to apply discretionary standards to the development of housing unless an applicant opts into those. We have made modifications that essentially reflect current practice, which is that, if it's related to a standard about landscaping, for example, we direct the standards for site design review back to the landscaping standards in the code. So if you're meeting the landscaping standards, you are therefore also meeting the site design review criteria. So this will make the code more compliant with state statute in that regard. And then the last bit of updates in the code really tried to remove some conflicting timelines that didn't match up with state statute. We looked at application review procedures and made some adjustments to reflect current practice, notably that we don't take paper forms in for applications and things of that nature. We also, in that process, looked at our pre-application requirement and opted to put an expiration date on those meetings. Typically, that is something an applicant must apply for prior to submitting a development application. And without an expiration, we can run into situations where they had a pre-application meeting that's like 3 years old and then submit a development application and standards change. And that makes it a more confusing process for everybody when we have to go back and explain that new standards have been adopted and what they submitted is not compliant. And so we're hoping that this expiration of a year will keep information more current. Lastly, at your direction, we had meetings in February with both development review boards to get their input on their experience serving on the DRB and what advice they might offer you as you consider consolidating down to one DRB panel. I think on the whole, we heard a gratitude to be serving the community and a desire to be doing that. And because of that, the people who were there felt like meetings get canceled a lot and they're not serving the community that they signed up to serve. So there was a preference to have fewer canceled meetings and, to the point about flexibility that we heard from you at the last work session, I think on the whole, DRB members expressed a willingness to be flexible and be available for additional meetings if needed throughout the month. So our proposed amendments based on this would consolidate the 2 DRBs into one panel, but would increase the number of people serving on that panel from 5 to 7. It provides a little more flexibility in terms of making quorum for a meeting, but it also provides an increased opportunity for people to serve. And so that would essentially have the city's quasi-judicial body have the same number of members as the Planning Commission. The way that these amendments have been drafted, they would be effective. The change to the panels would become effective in 2027 so that we aren't changing anything with the current appointments that we have this year. So with that, we just want to know if you have any questions or comments on the proposed amendments before we do our final edits for public hearing. If, in particular, any of thoughts you have on some of the waivers and either, should they remain eligible, should we consider some criteria as we move into the next phase of the project? And then as well, if you have any feedback on that 10,000 square foot cap for modifications, we would take that as well. Thank you.
Councilor Skull.
So good information, thank you. My question is concerning the waiver process. I think the waiver process should stay in place. I think it's a good thing. We had lots of discussions about that when I was on Planning Commission, and I think we talked about it on DRB too. And it gives some flexibility to the system as the developer or the architect works through the process. Question is if a waiver submitted and it's not accepted, or for some reason it has to go to appeal, is there an internal city process to look at that appeal first before it goes to LUBA?
That's a good question. So because an application with a waiver would be considered not clear and objective, but discretionary. There would be more appeals rights, not just to the applicant, but to other interested parties. That appeal, if an appeal were filed, whether or not there was support for the waiver or not in the initial application, that first appeal hearing would be before the DRB. And so it would go through the city appeals process, which first step would be DRB. A decision could be made there, and if there were no further appeals, it would be final, but there would also be the option to then appeal to city council. The city council is the final local review authority for the development applications in that case. And so it wouldn't be until it gets through that city appeals process that something could be appealed to LUBA.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Shevlin.
Thank you. You've done a good job making changes as far as the amendments. It's not easy when the legislature tells you have to do something and then trying to make sure we're up to code on everything. My comments specifically have to do with the development review boards and the two panels. I'm particularly sensitive to citizens that volunteer to be part of the community and making decisions about the community. And I believe we handled it well. We here on the council and you as well, as far as meeting with them. I believe moving to the 7-member panel is appropriate beginning in 2027. And just recognizing that when we have volunteers, we want to have some work for them to do. And already they're wanting to be flexible to say, okay, well, if we don't have enough meetings, but we'll be available if something comes up. I just want to acknowledge that. And I'm sure the mayor or other comments this evening will be talking about volunteer recognition events coming up here in the city, but I'm just really grateful that we have citizens that want to continue to be involved and make decisions. And I'm in support of the amendments. I don't have any changes that I would make to the waivers. And thanks for your work.
Thank you. Counselor Cunningham.
Yeah, I had a question, and maybe this is for the city attorney regarding the, what was outlined in, I believe it was HB 4037, that said that we are, correct me if I'm wrong, but it says that we are not allowed to inform people outside of that 100-foot radius.
If, Kim might speak better to
Sorry,
this, but my
I guess the
understanding.
first question is for Kim here.
Sure. So, how up until this bill, how the way that mailed notification radiuses have been called out in state statute has been to set a minimum. What 4037 introduced for the eligible application types, which is not every residential application, but it's residential development applications meeting clear and objective standards. It says that you cannot go, you may go no more than 100 feet. So essentially, the minimum's 100 feet, but the maximum's 100 feet, unless it's a certain number of units, I think it's 20, then it can go up to 500 feet. We did not recommend that multi-tiered approach in this application package because the feedback we got during the last round of work sessions when we posed the question, it seemed to be pretty clear that we didn't want to introduce the legal risk of managing multiple notification radii for the city for mailed notices. But yeah, essentially it's limiting the distance.
So then I go back to you with the question of, this seems like a wild overreach by the state legislature to limit our ability to inform our citizens of things in our city.
Yeah, and I again, don't want to speak for Kim, but if I recall our planning commission, city council all kind of blur together on this topic because it's happening so rapidly. But one of the things that we have discussed are the mailed notice is what is being discussed in that provision. And so what we have talked about are what are other tools and avenues that might be available that are outside the mailed notice language that may be available to the city to still utilize. So things like, for example, posting at the site that, there's an application pending on this that we currently do. Those kinds of things as ways for us to give additional information out to the community outside of this mailed notice radius provision.
Yes.
You don't want to make any legal opinions on the state legislature's decision tonight? I'll give you that one.
I mean, I have my personal opinions.
So do I.
I have legal opinions at this point.
And as part of that, I would like to thank, because she happens to be in the room tonight, Representative Sue Smith is in the back there, I can see. And she is the sole state representative who voted against this. So thank you very much for standing up for our home rule and for our local rights to control our future as our own city. So very much appreciated. Along those lines, I asked City Recorder Kim Valise to add these documents to the official record tonight and to have a copy for each counselor up here, as well as the city attorney and city manager. But it's a copy of Sherwood's measures 34,347 and 34,348. And the first one, the caption is it amends charter and enshrines citizen involvement in land use decisions. That would update their charter to, for type 2 or higher applications, mailed notices must be sent in advance to all property owners within 1,000 feet of the subject property. So I don't know if that's something that they're going to run into any issues with this state legislature on, but they're updating their city charter to try and further protect their home rule and their local control with that measure. And then the second one establishes city authority over annexation decisions. Both of these, the city council referred to the ballot on behalf of their citizens to offer those citizens that expanded trust and surety of transparency and accountability in their city representatives, that they have their backs in controlling what's going on in the city, and that they trust their citizens to be able to be a part of that process as well. With that, the other thing is, I was reading through all this, it's hard to kind of try to tell what changes are being made to our code that are due to the House bill and the Senate bills, and which ones we are going above and beyond for. And there was no distinct way to tell in the packet, but I was hoping that maybe between now and the public hearing on this, that there might be some way to illustrate for council and the community what we have to change and what we are voluntarily updating to this, so that we can compare and ensure that what we're doing kind of follows that role of Sherwood City Council in making sure that we are doing everything we can to maintain our local control. So that would be my request on this. Thank you for all the work on this. Obviously a lot, trying to dig through. I was trying to read all the legalese and all that fun stuff and bouncing around between sections. Always fun reading all these bills. But I know that at the end of the day, poor Representative Ricky Smith lost that vote just a little. So we just have to go with it now. Just another thing that we have to just go along with. But I would like to see if we can delineate that a little bit and just understand that better.
If I may ask a clarifying question,
Sure.
Are you, because I could see a couple of ways of potentially doing that. Are you thinking something more, because I could see putting together a table of section by section and maybe just highlighting which changes are required by which bill versus which ones are combination, or staff, and something that staff had suggested in conversation with Planning Commission and Council. So that's one approach. The other approach, which I think might be a little more onerous, and I don't know it would be as user-friendly, would be to actually annotate the code markup, which I think would probably require us to maybe do like a second copy of it. And so I just would like your feedback as what you think you would be looking for in that.
Yeah, no, some colored highlighting that says like this is from the legislature and we have to do this, and then the other one just saying that these are updates that we think would be helpful. And I in my notes I said material changes. So if we're changing the name from council to what are the responsible or the review authority? Thank you. wording is one thing, but kind of these material changes that make differences in our notification distances in the process, more than just the way that we clean up language and things like that. But yeah, just doing the highlighting back and forth, that would be completely sufficient, and it would be much appreciated.
If I may just respond to that as well. So we could potentially go back to the slide too that lists what the changes are. I think the HPS Strategy 3 is also included in most of the state-related changes. So it would be like the legislative changes that are also supported by HPS C that was adopted by the city. So I think besides, the distance of the notification radius, that's straight out of the state. And then the adjustments, or, when you're adding to a site that's not residential, the
class
amendments.
2.
Yeah, so that is completely outside of residential and a staff suggested via discussion with Planning Commission, City Council. But I think everything else would fall into the state / HPSC bucket.
So would it be, I guess, would there be any, are you aware of any delineations between where it would fall into the state requirements and the HPSC? Is there anything in there that we went?
The 100-foot radius is not part of the HPSC, definitely.
Right. I guess to clarify, I'm looking to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff here on what is the state making us do? What are we doing voluntarily that if we just didn't want to do it and didn't want to make a change, we could absolutely strike it, just leave it the way it is? And what is the state making us do?
Okay, I think we can huddle together as a team and figure out the way that we can accomplish that in the most transparent way possible. We don't want to add confusion to an otherwise hefty attachment in the code. But, maybe even if it's a box in each section that summarizes what's what, we'll throw around some ideas. But I think we would want it to be clear as well, so.
Great, thank you. That would just be helpful, in looking at those Sherwood measures that they refer to the ballot, and to, keep it on our radar of whether or not that's something that our citizens deserve from our council. So thank you.
Let me jump in if I can, because the Sherwood charter amendments were something that I had an interest early on when I first had notice. It would be helpful that maybe the city attorney could prepare something for us to show the distinction between the charter in Sherwood and Wilsonville. And because I think Sherwood doesn't have a DRB, possibly. There may be some distinguishments between the two. And I have talked with other mayors in mayor meetings with Mayor Rosner, where there's likely going to be litigation that's going to arise because of the Sherwood charter amendments. And I'm one of those that I also am supportive of local rule, but I'm also supportive of keeping our expense down. So I wonder if we're in that lucky situation that we sit back and see how Sherwood does in this litigation or what happens. But that's what I've heard, but I don't have enough information from my perspective to know what's going on.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. So less about the notice charter amendment, but more about the annexation charter amendment. Not that I've had specific discussions with officials at Sherwood, but it looks to be very particular to address a Court of Appeals case out of Corvallis on their charter, and some language in comparing a state statute to the local charter. So it seems like what they're trying to do is get to a legal question that went unanswered in that Court of Appeals case. So it's untested. To your point, it's an untested question as far as what I'm reading from their charter amendment and the existing case law around that issue, and this debate about home rule and how far it extends. So yes, we can definitely do a comparison, and also I can provide some insights from what I see from those two charter amendments and just generally from kind of like the landscape, the legal landscape, what it's getting at. The other thing that I just wanted to note for Councilor Cunningham, because it's one of those things of balancing getting into the weeds, but also being very transparent about what we're doing here. So I want to get some additional clarification from you. So one of the things that is always fun as municipal legal counsel is when the state does something and then you're not sure what that means and they say, consult your legal counsel. And we go, well, we didn't write it. We didn't participate in the discussion, so thanks. So some of the proposals are based on, and it's particularly around the waiver language. They are based on what is written in state statute as given from guidance by HAPO. But at the end of the day, they say consult your legal counsel. So I will say there's some areas where it's gray, and we're kind of making a judgment call based on what the state statute says and some of the advice we're getting from HAPO. How in the weeds do you want us to get when because I feel like a highlight doesn't necessarily do that justice of that nuance that we're looking at. Versus, for example, I know we had to address the appeals process in all of this because of the appellate rights that are pretty clear. With that, we also felt like we could clean up our appeals process language just generally and make it easier to understand. So there's some things that we're going above and beyond because we're in there, we have to make a change anyway. So I think that is easier to sort of parse out what is the requirement versus what are we cleaning up because we think it makes sense to do that. So with that, do you have additional feedback on what you'd like to see from staff as far as making those distinctions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if there's an in-between there, maybe we pull out the third highlighter color.
Okay.
And just a quick note annotation on it, just to give some clarification on, not required, but due to this, this appears to be a good change to make in order to clarify other things in other parts of the document. Whatever those things might be. Just a quick note. Yeah, I don't need all the legalese and nerd stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think. Counselor Skull.
Yeah, I think you've all circled around it a bit, but I have to ask the question, if we decide to go down a path on our own, say, per se, the radius, plus or minus 100 with no tolerance into it, we decide to do our own thing, what's the penalty? I mean, do we get a planning speeding ticket, or do we have to go to court? I mean, how does that work?
So if I had to guess, if I was reading tea leaves, which is always scary to do as a lawyer, my guess would be more likely where a challenge would come from is from a developer rather than the state stepping in. So for example, if we give out mailed notice that goes beyond, a developer, who is the only one who potentially has appeal rights, could appeal if for some reason it led to a decision being made in that land use decision. I don't see that being likely. I will say, though, the Corvallis case started as a developer. It was an annexation case. A developer was trying to get annexed in. It kept on getting, they kept on saying, well, you need to go out for a vote. It failed. It got challenged. The state did step in that case and ultimately was successful. So it's kind of this balance of, usually where it starts is a developer challenging something that a local government is doing, saying you're not complying with state law. And if it appears that the local government is engaging in a continual pattern of violating the state law, then the state ultimately will step in. That's what we've seen play out in other jurisdictions. And what the state then does is they take us to court, and then the court says we have to follow state law. I mean, that's what's happened in these other cases.
Any other questions or thoughts? I just will say that I'm all about notice to the community. You know, in fact, I had issues when I was on DRB if I thought, you know, the community wasn't properly noticed. So I'm a little concerned about the changes in the notice. But my understanding, we're talking about the mail notices.
Right.
And we have the flexibility, we'll still have the sign out possibly. We could create a list on our website, couldn't we, of listing all the, a map of what's going on, so there's a way to get around maybe this issue?
I mean,
Because
if I were to have to argue it, I would say mailed notice means something different than posting or putting something up on a website.
Right.
I would strongly suggest we do that, because frankly, to me, the sign that's physically out there is the one that when I'm walking or driving by, gives me a wake-up call. And I understand some people read their mail more than others, but that is something they go, oh, what's happening in our area? So that's important. But I just really value community input, and I've always thought that. I'm uncomfortable with the changes of DRB, you know, it's just because I was so used to watching the community come in and share. I think it was a helpful exercise. And the way this change has been made, it takes away community involvement. And I get a little bit nervous, well, it's not a little, a lot nervous when it's an administrative decision. Because administrative decisions aren't necessarily watched visually on how they're reached, they just happen. And DRB was a method by which people came and were able to see things happening and make a decision. I value our experts at the city, but it just takes one step away of our community actually being involved in the process. I do agree with enlarging the DRB if we're going to be going down this road to 7. I think that makes a lot of sense because I think that people that take the time to go through Civics Academy and apply for these boards and commissions, that they should have an opportunity to serve and help their community. That's why they signed up. So I think that's a great idea. So those are my comments. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is 2026 legislative report.
Okay, let me get full screen here, sorry. Good evening, City Council. I'm Everett Wild, the Government Relations Manager for the city, and I'm joined here tonight by
Greg Leo of the Leo Company.
Greg is our former now, but still around government relations consultant. On April 1st, we transitioned to a new government relations contract with CFM. But Greg and I did the 2026 legislative session together, and so we wanted to give you a recap of what happened and answer any questions you may have.
And I'll just say for the record, Mayor O'Neill, members of the Wilsonville City Council, my name is Greg Leo with the Leo Company, as introduced. Thank you.
Take it away.
Okay. What a great session. What a busy session. So first, just want to go through the numbers. 33 days in total out of the 35-day max. There's 8 weekend days, 304 measures passed through the process, 599 amendments, 279 committee meetings. That's over 11 hearings a day. Wow. And 143 measures passed. So there was a lot of, the next slide, important themes. We're just going to kind of hit the treetops tonight to allow some time so you can ask more in-depth questions. But on the major themes, budget was the overriding theme coming into the session because of the passage of H.R. 1, there was a major budget deficit. It improved with the disconnect and even more with, when we found out what the revenue collections would be. So the budget, the legislature did a good job of getting the, budget in balance for the biennium without too much difficulty. Transportation is a big theme. It is still a matter in progress. We will be back, the city will be back, and all cities will be back in 2027 to work out the details on the transportation funding package. A good session for economic development, especially as it relates to our enterprise zones and the Moda Center. Tourism had two kind of major bills with the local act, which is, of course, the league's highest priority about the reallocation of the transit lodging tax at the level for post-2003 cities. So not all destination marketing organizations were affected, but it certainly made a big difference. And also the 1.25% increase in the statewide transit lodging tax for wildlife was major. We saw quite a bit of concern, serious concern about immigration enforcement and legislation to protect the rights of all citizens, regardless of their legal status. There was a lot of discussions about gun regulations as it relates to some of the litigation that we've seen on Second Amendment issues and the regulation of who can get a firearm. And then, of course, always education funding and healthcare funding were major priorities and received a lot of attention.
And I should say that the themes that we highlighted there were not necessarily all things that the city was engaged on. A lot of them don't apply directly to the city. They were just issues that were coming up a lot during session. As Greg said, the budget was a major consideration. We kind of entered the session expecting there to be major budget reductions. There were still reductions made, but they were less significant than expected. That was due to three reasons. The first was an improved revenue forecast that came out partway through session. The second was federal disconnect due to Senate Bill 1507. So Oregon tracks the federal definition of income tax, taxable income rather. And there was a disconnect on three specific provisions of that definition, and that helped rebalance the budget to the tune of $311 million, and then $128 million of reductions due to position eliminations and hiring freezes, materials and service reductions, reduced travel at state agencies, that kind of thing. A note for future years, there's kind of a trend of declining revenue in lottery, some criminal fines, marijuana, and corporate activity accounts that could impact shared revenues going into the future, because we get a small slice, but a slice of all of those. Some new investments to highlight. On the general fund side of the ledger, there was $5 million in industrial site readiness. That also pairs with $10 million of bonds for industrial site readiness in the other half of the ledger, so $15 million total, plus $10 million from 2025, so $25 million total for industrial site readiness. I've heard that those funds will be available fairly soon. Definitely something that Wilsonville is interested in and will apply for. So other general fund investments for wildfire, small city infrastructure, and some other projects. The big thing on the bond side was the Moda Center renovation that appeared partway through session when the new owner of the Trailblazers talked about potentially moving the team to a different media market, and then this Moda Center renovation conversation kind of became a central focus of the session, and it received pretty substantial bond funding. Next, moving on to transportation and some ODOT stuff. The ODOT budget rebalance was done through a bill 1601. And as you can see on the pie chart there, it made changes to more or less equal shares of some vacancy savings, some program reductions, and then redirecting funds, both federal funds and state highway funds, to allow for more O&M flexibility from those funds. There were program reductions to Safe Routes to School and to Connect Oregon, which the city may benefit from those programs indirectly, so there's some potential loss to those programs there. most important thing for the city of Wilsonville that passed or was successful related to transportation, as you all know, we received $1 million in an earmark in the last 2025 session to kind of kickstart that effort on the Boone Bridge. We were able to keep that full, so it did not get cut. It remains at $1 million. I also learned just this afternoon that Representative Salinas has submitted an earmark for the Boone Bridge at the federal level. So progress happening there. Some other big transportation issues were the change of the referendum. I'm sure you all read about that in the news. And then some other bills that made small transportation tweaks. Nothing major. There was no big transportation package. So we'll be looking to 2027 to continue that conversation. There was a attempt in one of the bills via a couple of amendments to shift some revenue responsibility. At least that's how cities interpreted it. The amendments that failed, which the city and League of Oregon Cities advocated to remove those amendments, they would have basically allowed cities to raise revenue on our own in a particular way that we thought was a kind of precursor or prelude to eliminating state revenue sharing. So we were concerned about how that came about and were successful in removing those amendments from the bill. There are a couple of other bills that we think may come back in 2027, especially related to autonomous vehicles and some continued ODOT reforms. Economic development, Greg mentioned a little bit earlier, the enterprise zones was a major point of support from the city to allow flexibility in creating an enterprise zone. Previously, we were prohibited from doing it under the criteria in state law. With House Bill 4084, we would now be able to create an enterprise zone in the city and kind of use that as a deal sweetener to help attract a company that may be looking at multiple sites across the state or in multiple states to kind of lock them down and bring them to Wilsonville. And then I already mentioned the funding for industrial site readiness as well. There was a lot of conversation around a Senate Bill 1586 that had some tax incentives that could have been beneficial to Wilsonville, but also involved some land use, a pretty sizable land expansion in Hillsborough, and that drove a lot of conversation during session, and it ended up not passing, but it kind of brought up some questions around land use and how land ties into economic development statewide.
So in land use, there's a lot of discussion of UGB expansions. House Bill 4035 expanded the eligibility for cities in Metro to amend their UGBs under a temporary program. Probably not an issue for us because we, have ample urban reserves. But for some cities, this gives them some flexibility for UGB expansion. HB 4082 added some temporary UGB expansion for programs that would assist seniors with manufactured housing, including manufactured housing for people less than 120% of the median income. So for seniors and people of low income to be able to expand the urban growth boundary to some degree in order to build additional housing. So not a big session with land use, but two very important UGB bills, I think. So in the housing area, we have talked a lot tonight about House Bill 4037. So I will just say that there's a lot of changing going on with some of the original HAPO legislation, and I just want to credit Kim and the staff and the excellent discussion you as a council just had on this. But we have to, in my opinion, if I may editorialize, we have to watch that we don't lose our local control with 1,000 cuts. It's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. So each little increment of local control you lose, like noticing and things like that, are important things to fight for, I think. But anyway, House Bill 4082 establishing the Housing Opportunity Fund for HB 4036. And that's deposit bonds for use by the Housing and Community Services Department to provide more additional funding for affordable housing. And SB 1561 which really was about some of the housing that was burnt in the fires, that the question is what building codes will apply to the new housing? Will you use the previous building codes, or will you use the updated housing codes when you rebuild that housing? So that's, we think, an important bill. We took a strong position on it. And those were pretty much, there's a lot going on in housing generally, and it's quite technical, but I think those are the high points.
The city doesn't engage very directly on a lot of public safety issues since we don't operate our own law enforcement agency, but a couple of high-profile bills that passed this session were related to masking for law enforcement. It was a direct response to the reports out of Minneapolis related to customs enforcement. And then some privacy concerns around license plate readers. There's some issues that Eugene was having around license plate readers and how the information was being shared and how secure the data was. So there was a bill to talk about privacy concerns for that. There was another bill that did not pass related to notifications if the city was subject to a cybersecurity incident, if we got hacked or ransomware, that we would have had to report that to the state within a particular time frame, a very short time frame, so short that we probably wouldn't even have all the answers. So there's a lot of discussion, good conversation around what does that time frame look like, and anyway, that bill ended up not passing.
The league led on HB 4005, which establishes the Water Professionals Day as the second Saturday in October. This is an opportunity to thank and celebrate those people who keep our water systems going. And of course, that's an important issue for us, I think. HB 4144, Battery Producer Responsibility Bill, so that people that produce batteries share in the cost of how those batteries are recycled. We were a supporter of that. HB 4134, which was probably one of the more controversial bills. That's the local tax, that's the 1.25 increase for wildlife. So the money that we would collect them from the statewide transient lodging tax would pay for natural resources staff at ODFW and some of the other agencies. So that one was strongly supported by the natural resources community, but opposed by the tourism community that felt that it added cost when we attract conventions and that kind of thing. Am I got the next one here? Okay.
I believe so, General Government.
General Government. To talk about the Oregon Government Ethics Committee with Representative Ricky Smith in the room is a little bit intimidating in that she was at the table on all of these things. So yeah, I'm not going to totally pass the baton to her, but when she comes up for her turn, I'm sure she will give you a lot of details. But it's basically very good news, and that is that legislation was passed which allows the feeding of city councils, and you don't have to declare it if we buy you hot dogs or a pizza. So that is not an ethics violation, which is really good. On a more serious note, though, the serial meetings clarification was badly needed because legislation, as was needed to clarify the opinion of the Oregon Government Ethics Commission about how city councils can interact without being considered a public deliberation. So I think that was very important. And then the league really weighed in on getting a city attorney or a person with a background in local government on the Oregon Government Ethics Commission in order to bring some sanity to the process of that regulatory. I will not editorialize any more on that, but I'm sure that Representative Ricky Smith will be able to tell you much more on those issues. So. Great.
Well, if we can clone our city attorney and give them.
I see an excellent candidate.
Yeah.
As you can see here, So great.
A clone.
So, looking at the revenue and finance side, I already mentioned the federal disconnect bill. There was also one related to cash transaction rounding. So this is due to the penny shortage, but it affects how much money people pay if they're paying in cash. And then there was a bill heavily supported by the League of Oregon Cities related to the split of how lodging taxes can be used. It had been 70% had to go to marketing for future tourism, and 30% could be used for general government uses. That's been shifted to 50-50. So it allows cities, especially on the coast, some of those like Newport, Lincoln City, they had this influx of folks that are needing law enforcement services, needing fire, AMR type services during the summer and not being able to adequately pay for them with all this influx of tourism. So it was opposed by some of the destination marketing organizations because they wanted to get more revenue and bring more people in, but it was supported by the League of Oregon Cities. So that was a...
And I just want to jump in because, I'm always saying that we're a city that punches over our weight. We're a 2003 transient lodging tax city. I mean, so we were a leader that put that in place before there was legislation that this affected. To that degree, we were not affected. But, also, we are a city, Explore Wilsonville is a city department. And so in a way, it doesn't matter whether, the destination marketing organization, when it's part of the city, can make those kinds of stronger, more directed. But the idea is local government needs to be reimbursed for the impacts of tourism. The legislature stepped up and passed that.
So we've talked about a lot of things, some of which are directly applicable to Wilsonville, some aren't. So just a roundup of some of the highlights that matter the most to us. We protected the Boone Bridge funding, like I said. We've got that flexibility for enterprise zones. Public meetings law clarity was a big thing that we worked on this session. And then continued partnership with LOC and other cities on shared revenues and other issues that we all care about. So there's a lot packed into just a handful of days. Really want to thank Senator Courtney Neron-Mislin, Rep. Sue Reekie-Smith, and their teams, all the nonpartisan support staff in the Policy and Research Office and Legislative Fiscal, getting us bill amendments online so we can analyze them and helping understand what the fiscal impact could be to local government. There's a section on most bills that says that. So appreciate all the legislative staff's work. Thank you also to City Council and the Wilsonville staff. Often I'll send out a bill and say, hey, I need input on this from staff in community development or transit or somewhere else in the city, and really appreciate everyone that helped and got answers that Greg and I needed to advocate for the city in Salem. And then, of course, all the coalitions that we're part of. And a couple of fun photos. So there was a reception in the governor's office after the construction wrapped up. So I stole a seat at the governor's ceremonial desk. Greg snapped that photo.
I took a picture of Governor Wild's campaign photo there.
And then on the right is Greg testifying on SCR 206, which was a memorial for Senator Aaron Woods. So a little bit of live action happening during the session.
And thanks to LaTanya Blanco, who's here tonight, who really guided that whole process. Just a point of personal privilege, Mr. Mayor and Council, if I may. As I said, last week at the Clackamas County Business Alliance meeting, I really appreciate the support over 27 years of the City Council. It's half of my working life that I've worked with you, and it's hard to go, but I think we're in really good hands. And so normally you'd pass like a torch or something, but in this case, and this is not a contribution, this is a recognition, I passed my Wilsonville hat, which I have worn proudly at many different places. Well, it's pretty clean. And there it is, Everett, to you. The passing of the torch, the identity of Wilsonville as we deal externally with the legislature and the other agencies. I think the city of Wilsonville is in very good hands, and thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate that, and I have some things to say as well. So as you mentioned, you've been here as the city's contract lobbyist since 1997, nearly 30 years. And while Greg serves from the shadows and the elected officials take the spotlight, you've been a secret weapon for Wilsonville. We often say that Wilsonville is a city that punches above its weight, and your contributions are a big reason for that. Some major city initiatives that have benefited from Greg's advocacy include giving Wilsonville the agency to determine where to locate the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, which allowed for the development of Villebois, promoting the Willamette River as both a municipal water source and a component of the city's tourism promotion program, securing funding for Wilsonville projects that have helped the city advance world-class development, ensuring the voices of our elected officials and Charbonneau residents are heard during multiple iterations of Aurora Airport master planning, protecting the French Prairie Rural Reserves from overdevelopment, And that is just the tip of the iceberg. One of the things that has made Greg so effective over the years is his charisma. It's a great skill for a lobbyist and one that Greg has mastered. He always greets people by name and remembers details about them like their family members or their interests. His role isn't easy or glamorous. You have to ask repeatedly before people start paying attention to your issues. You need to know when to stand firm, when to compromise. You're on the front line defending decisions and positions that are your clients', not necessarily your own. You spend years building relationships that can break over one bill. I spoke with my predecessor, Mark Ottenod, about Greg, and he shared, quote, "Greg Leo is a credible, authoritative lobbyist and tourism promoter who tackles challenges with gusto, and he is a joy to work with," end quote. Although we only worked together in this capacity for a few months, I have appreciated Greg's wisdom, expertise, and camaraderie. When you're in the trenches during legislative session, you need a confidant by your side. Thank you, Greg, for being in the trenches with me. Fortunately, although this is a transition, it isn't the end of our relationship with Greg, who will continue to be a presence with our tourism groups, with the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition, and as a subcontractor for our new government relations consultant, CFM Advocates, continuing to work on issues that matter to Wilsonville. So from one lobbyist to another, and on behalf of so many staff members and elected officials with whom you've worked, thank you, Greg, for your hard work and influence on Wilsonville's behalf.
Thank you, Everett. Thank you.
And with that, if you have any questions.
Counselor Shevlin.
A comment. Thank you, Mr. Wild and Mr. Leo, for your report. I always enjoy reading it. I like the format. It's so nice to be able to look through it and get a capture of what went on and be able to interpret and understand what happened at the legislature. And thank you for your hard work this past session. I want to recognize Mr. Leo, who also served in a similar capacity in my community of Charbonneau as the government affairs consultant for many years. I don't know that it was 27,
So,
but it was close.
around 25.
Yeah, but nevertheless, Greg worked tirelessly in our community, kept his ear to the ground, always let us know when something was coming up. He was the force behind Charbonneau uniting our voice in opposition to polling. When we realized that the proposed location of the tolling booth would create a situation where Charbonneau residents, anybody living south of the river that was a Wilsonville resident, would have to pay to get into their city. Greg was the force, as I said, to be able to help us get our voice together and appear, what was that, 24? 24?
24.
Seems like it was just last week. But anyhow, I know you're off to new horizons, but you will be missed, both here in the city and also in my community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you both for the presentation, your hard work in this short session. But of course, special thanks to Mr. Leo.
Thank you.
You have always been there if I've had a question, extremely responsive, sometimes pestering me a little bit. If I said, hey, can we chat? I'd hear 3 or 4 text messages might come up through the morning as I was working on something else. And okay, Greg, okay. Thank you. Thanks for keeping on me. But any question I had, you were right there to answer. I always, always a straight shooter with me. I always appreciated your feedback to me as well. Sometimes criticism, sometimes positive, but all taken well, all appreciated. So thank you very much. That's a long service to our city, and I'm glad to hear that you're going to be working with CFM Advocates and still kind of in the fight for us. I remember when I saw that that proposal was up, I called you and I said, who do I need to go to fight for you? Who do I need to go to war for you with? And you said, no, it's okay. This is good. So humility, good guy, appreciate you. Thank you for your service to our city.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor Skull.
Also would like to thank both of you. Great report. I appreciate you taking the time the other day to walk me through this since I missed the French Prairie meeting and all that. And Greg, great job. Thank you. I met you back in 2015 on a tour through the state capitol.
Oh, yeah.
You were very, very knowledgeable, and you walked us through all the hallways and all the secret offices and everything that was going on in there, and really appreciated that and learned a lot from that. And you've taken that experience and for years and years of experience and done well for the city of Wilsonville. So thank you very much, and good luck with whatever's next, and enjoy yourself.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate it.
Mr. Leo, I first met you 12 years ago. You may not remember, but when Kinder Morgan Pipeline was a concern of mine as a community member. And you're always gracious to me back then. As mayor, especially in the first year as mayor, during the longer legislative session, I could count on you to text me at 5 in the morning or 5:30 or talking with you on the phone while I'm walking my dog, to give me the latest update of what's happening. And you always kept me informed, always were in a position to explain what was going on, the nuances. I've never seen someone, when I'm in Salem, be able to multitask as well as multi-message, if you will, to various leaders. It's a talent that many of us will never have. I don't know how you do it, but thank you for your service. You essentially can look at Wilsonville today and say you were part of building it. So, and that's putting it mildly, given how long you've been here for the city. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the new service you'll provide in a different capacity, but we appreciate you always.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions on the report? Nothing? Okay. You did that good of a job that we.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, with that, before we adjourn the work session, council, since Council President Berry is not going to be present, when I go through the agenda, I'll be calling each of you to handle various roles that she customarily did. I'm going to go in order with Councilor Cunningham first, and Councilor Shevlin at the end, Councilor Scholes. I didn't want to surprise you. With that, we're adjourned till 7:05, if that's okay. Does that give us enough time? 7:05. You're okay. I'll call to order the meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for April 6, 2026 at 7:06 PM. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Shevlin,
Here.
Counselor Cunningham,
Here.
Counselor Skoll,
Here.
Mayor O'Neill,
Here.
and Council President Barry is excused.
Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Counselor Cunningham, can I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
I move to approve the following order of agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0. Good evening, and for those who celebrate, happy Easter Monday. It's been a few weeks since our last regular city council meeting. I hope everyone had a chance to step away, enjoy spring break. If you have children in school, spend time with family and recharge. For those who celebrate Easter yesterday, as my family did, I hope it was meaningful time, one that brings a sense of renewal, hope, faith, and togetherness. It has been an absolutely beautiful weekend. And for those who are currently observing Passover, I hope it is a special time of reflection, resilience, and a renewed appreciation for freedom, a value we all share in this community. Tonight is also a special moment for our city. Gina Troja has been spent years at the staff table in the back of the room offering guidance, support, and a steady leadership. Now she joins us with the city council on the dais in her new role as city manager. Welcome, Gina. Next are a couple of proclamations that we're issuing tonight. I'll go over them briefly. The first is the Arbor Day Proclamation. Wilsonville recognizes the important role trees play in our community. In our annual Arbor Day Proclamation, the city of Wilsonville has had the honor of being recognized by the National Arbor Day Foundation as a Tree City USA for 28 consecutive years. The pride we take in being a Tree City USA can be seen in the consistent care of our trees and the efforts to plant new trees. Additionally, the city has partnered with a local nonprofit, Friends of Trees, to strengthen our urban tree canopy and ensure the benefits of trees, including clean air, clean water, shade, soil retention, wildlife habitat, and many, many more are available to all Wilsonville residents. On Arbor Day and every day, the city encourages our residents and businesses to plant and care for trees for the benefit of this and future generations. Our second proclamation recognizes Volunteer Appreciation Month. This one matters a lot. We have over 300 people in this community who are giving their time quietly, consistently, and without expecting anything in return. And the truth is, without them, many of the things we value in Wilsonville simply wouldn't happen or wouldn't happen at the level we expect. When neighbors are out cleaning up our roads, shelving books in the library, delivering meals to seniors, serving on our boards and committees, and stepping up in so many other ways, they're not just helping out. They are shaping the kind of community we all want to live in. In a time when city budgets are tight, their contributions aren't just appreciated, they're essential for us. So to every volunteer, thank you for your time, your commitment, and for helping make Wilsonville the community we're all proud to call home. The city will host a volunteer appreciation event on Wednesday, April 22nd All current volunteers are invited and can get more information and the link to RSVP through the department they volunteer with. Turning to my activities, in addition to my regular constituent and regional meetings with other mayors and public officials, on March 18th, I attended a reception with the artists of the new mural in the children's room of the Wilsonville Public Library. Our young library patrons helped inspire artist Julia Hunkler's beautiful work. The mural is a great addition to the library and part of our tradition of public art here in Wilsonville. Later that day, I attended with Council President Berry and Councilor Skoll a tour of the Portland General Electric's Integrated Operations Center. This is where PG&E monitors power demand, buys and sells excess power generated by other utilities to meet need, ensures all the components of the system, such as transformers and substations, are functioning and coordinates repair efforts and disaster response. I appreciated learning more about PGE's long-term preparations for demand growth and hazards like wildfires, as well as how they keep the lights on day to day. Many thanks to the PGE team who led the tour, including Larry Beckdahl, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Advanced Energy Delivery, and Meredith Armstrong, who's the Senior Manager for Local Government Affairs and our direct contact for the city of Wilsonville, and all their colleagues that supported that tour. On March 31st, I attended the Clackamas County Business Alliance, which hosted a mayor's summit, and with that, I participated with 10 mayors from across Clackamas County. We each shared our city's priorities, needs, development projects, and ways local governments and the business community can become better partners. The balance of my past working schedule can be found in my written materials, which I'll provide the city recorder at the end of the meeting. With respect to upcoming meetings or events, we have a number of events which I encourage you to look at the City of Wilsonville's calendar at wilsonvilleoregon.gov/calendar. I'll highlight a couple tonight. First is the Pollinator Pedal, a community bike ride this Saturday through some of our beautiful pollinator gardens. It's a great way to enjoy the outdoors, spend time with family, and see firsthand the work that goes into making our city as vibrant as it is. The ride is a 10-mile loop starting at the Memorial Park tennis courts at 10:30 a.m. this Saturday. It's family friendly, but helmets are required. If you're able, I encourage you to come out, enjoy the ride, and take in a little bit of what makes this community special. Following the Smart Bike Ride on April 11th, I'll be attending the Rotary Club of Wilsonville's Heart of Gold Gala and auction along with other city councilors. This is always a special event. It brings people together, but more importantly, it recognizes some of those in our community who quietly make a difference every day through their service. The First Citizens Award is one of those meaningful ways to honor that. Congratulations to this year's finalists, Brad Christensen, Jenny Hill, John Hillen Payne, Scott Nichols, and Rick Wallace. And thank you for everything you do to give back and strengthen our community. Proceeds from the event will go to the Wilsonville Rotary Foundation, which supports all of the Rotary service projects and programs that benefit our community. Our next City Council meeting will be on Monday, April 20th, starting at 7 p.m. The meeting will begin with my annual State of the City address, in which I will outline a vision for Wilsonville rooted in belonging and how we shape our community for future generations. All are invited to attend or to watch on the city's YouTube channel or cable television. That's Xfinity Channel 30, I guess, Ziply Channel 32, as I've been told. And that's the extent of my report. Turning to communications, please join me in welcoming our State Senator Courtney Neuron-Mislin and State Representative Sue Ricky Smith. They can come on up. They both work hard on behalf of this community, and we appreciate their service. They'll be sharing a brief recap of their work during the 2026 legislative session. And thank you for taking the time to come before council.
Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors. We're looking forward to presenting this evening. I think it's ready to go, right? Okay. So really appreciate the meeting so far and being here with all of you tonight. I have a brief presentation. I've been asked to present 5 to 7 minutes, so I'll try to talk fast because I am known to go on and on and on. So hello, Courtney Neuron-Mislin, your state senator serving District 13, and honored to present a quick recap of our 2026 short session that we held in February and the beginning of March. And how do I advance the slide? Spacebar? Oh, let's do spacebar. Okay. So in this session, it was the short session, and you heard a great recap. I really enjoyed Everett and Greg's recap of the session. A lot of what I have in my slides is similar to the content in their great presentation. But our goal as your representation in the legislature is to understand the Wilsonville priorities and deliver the best we can on those. So I worked really hard on a few of the top priorities and really appreciated the legislative document that that Greg and Everett provided us, so that we really had that touchstone of what we needed to make sure that we were focusing on and uplifting on your behalf. So we passed the recreational liability compromise. The original bill was amended. If you're following vote history, you'll notice that I voted against it as it headed out of the Senate. The House then worked on it more, and it came back, and I was able to support 1517. Ideally, liability waivers will be now more enforceable, and insurance will be more available, ideally cheaper for sports, fitness, and recreational activities. We also, as you heard in their presentation, worked really hard. Both Representative Ricky Smith and myself were part of Representative Sosa's work group on the public meetings law challenges, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing clarity and that we were cleaning up any statutes that needed to be addressed. So with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission work group, we came up with 3 bills. We passed a bill adding a member of local government or with local government experience to the Government Ethics Commission. We also made sure that we cleared up any confusion around if food and beverage, say at a baby shower, is allowed for public officials. And we also, of great concern to our city councilors, our county commissioners, those in public office, we address serial communication statute clarity. I do think we're going to need to make sure that we're monitoring how 4177 is implemented, and you have a lot of commitment among the legislators on that work group that we will try to make sure that it's working for everyone as intended. We also know that housing and local control are very important to Wilsonville. We passed the Local Act, as you heard. This lets cities manage more of the transient lodging taxes that come to the city, ideally helping to better serve local needs. This will really impact our tourist heavy cities who need to make sure that the infrastructure is keeping up with a tourism season, public safety infrastructure is keeping pace. So this is a really great emphasis on the local control and trusting our local governments to invest appropriately for local needs. We also made sure that we listened to the lack of housing available and accessible for Oregonians experiencing disability. So we passed House Bill 1576 that will ideally increase inventory for people who are having a hard time finding wheelchair accessible mobility challenges. that they're able to find housing. Representative Ricky Smith and I hear you when we're talking about local control. You'll see some of our no votes in the bills listed here relative to housing, land use, local decision-making. These reflect our support for smart planning, for your understanding of the local land use and local housing needs, and making sure that we're part of the voice, continuing to emphasize where our local governments can make the most agile and finesse decision on behalf of local communities. We also made a lot of investments that align with Wilsonville's top priorities. Representative Ricky Smith and I successfully defended the $1 million that we were able to get from the state in the 2025 transportation, in the 2025 session, knowing that the transportation package was not project heavy. We went for the dollars needed to advance the Boone Bridge, seismic resiliency capacity improvements. In partnership with Mayor O'Neill and Representative Congresswoman Salinas, we are continuing to try to move this project forward. And as you just heard, Congresswoman Salinas is pursuing federal funding, leveraging that state investment that we have started. I also want to take a moment to thank Greg Leo, as many of you have already done, and also Everett. Their work throughout this session has been incredible. But Greg, in terms of the Boone Bridge funding, I remember one of my first sessions, we were fighting for the study to understand the Boone Bridge at a deeper level, its seismic resiliency, capacity needs, how it was constructed. And Greg came rushing into my office at the end of a day, at the end of a session, and said, the funding for the study has been stripped out of the budget bill. And we were able to, thanks to his diligence, his focus, the way he was tracking the dollars that made a difference to Wilsonville, we were able to get that funding back into the final bill before passage. So I just really want to highlight, again, as many of you have, Greg's service to the city. So Washington County Courthouse is another priority for the region. I know that not much of Wilsonville is in Washington County. Like we fought for the Clackamas County Courthouse and built that, we need to make sure that we're fighting for a Washington County Courthouse. And we successfully, as a caucus, a Washington County caucus, defended the $1.25 million that we invested in 2025. So it might not seem like a new accomplishment, but defending the dollars that we invested in 2025 was part of the work we had to do, given the budget impacts in the 2026 session. As you heard also, we invested in the industrial site readiness, $10 million, but also there was a pot of $5 million and some previous investments. We need to continue as a region investing in this critical economic development tool, and I stand ready to continue to uplift how much these dollars leverage additional dollars for our region. In partnership with Wilsonville's top priorities, we invested in stabilizing employment-related daycare to the tune of $67 million. Again, this is stabilizing it. We do need to make sure we're continuing to increase and give access to families where the parents would like to work, and make sure that all families in Oregon have access to affordable, quality childcare. And we also invested in housing. $100 million is going to create and preserve affordable housing. Preservation of affordable housing is one of the areas I really like to work on, so that we know that our residents who are in subsidized housing don't suddenly experience market rate housing. Three more policies or areas that I want to highlight that we passed that protect Oregon are expanded earned income tax credits for 200,000 of Oregon's most vulnerable working families. We also balanced Oregon's budget. Different from our federal government who can run a deficit, we must balance our budget every cycle. So in Senate Bill 1507, we responded to the H.R. 1 federal H.R. 1 impacts and disconnected from some of the most harmful components to preserve $300 million $311 million that protect core services that Oregonians depend on, including healthcare, education, natural resources, childcare, and public safety. We also pushed back against federal overreach with a robust immigration justice package. The bills included protections of privacy, safety in hospitals and schools, making sure that we are protecting against unlawful immigration enforcement, and also that we're providing support to respond to ICE activities and communication in our communities. Also, something that I'm celebrating is investing in wildlife conservation and wildfire mitigation. House Bill 4134 dedicates funding to protect Oregon's natural resources and wildlife conservation through a 1.25 statewide transient lodging tax increase. So that'll be on like hotels, stays. So that we are able to invest in the things that really actually draw people to Oregon for tourism. As the co-chair of the Natural Resources Budget Committee, seeing how difficult it is to defend our natural resources budgets, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Marine Board, et cetera, Department of Agriculture, we really need those $1.25 to make sure that we're able to provide essential services for our natural resources. I've got 6 more policies that I want to highlight that I worked very closely on. We protected reproductive health care for patients and providers. That is making sure that providers seeking already legal reproductive or gender-affirming care here in Oregon are protected from legal attacks that originate out of our state. We also closed a predatory lending loophole that protects consumers, understanding that affordability is on Oregonians' minds. We made sure that out-of-state digital loan sharks are no longer able to charge triple-digit interest rates, putting people into cycles of debt. We also established a battery producer responsibility program. We've heard a lot about costly fires in our landfills, the impacts to human health of batteries, making sure that we have battery manufacturers selling in Oregon who are also then responsible for collecting and recycling those batteries was our goal, and we achieved it. And we put Oregon home buyers before billionaires with a bill to make sure that private equity firms have to wait 90 days after a home comes on the market before they're able to make an offer. So Oregon home buyers, our neighbors, will be able to make their offers first. If the home doesn't sell in those 90 days, then it would be open to private equity. We also, something I care a lot about is animal rights and humane treatment of animals. We fixed some oversight structures for animal rescue entities, ideally allowing more resources to go straight to animal welfare efforts. And we strengthened wage protections for bad actors who see penalties simply as a cost of doing business. This bill, House Bill 4089, established targeted criminal accountability for contractors who are knowingly working with unlicensed labor brokers. And now that we're in interim, Representative Ricky Smith and I are working on policies for upcoming sessions, listening to community. 3 areas that I work a lot on are education, environment, and I'll be looking at our transportation sector as well. I specifically am working in education on our post-secondary attainment steering committee in partnership with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. I'll continue to work on my efforts to provide school meals and quality nutrition to students in Oregon schools. This helps with not only healthy development and social interactions, but of course with learning outcomes. And then I also interested in dusting off some of the work that I did as I led the statewide educator salary task force and looking at bringing back some of those recommendations that need to be revisited. In terms of the environment, I'm the co-vice chair of the Environmental Caucus and really focused on clean energy solutions and how that can play a role in our economic strategy. I introduced a bill on virtual power plants, which, Mayor, as you toured the PGE facility, you might have seen they have an entire room dedicated to their virtual power plants pilot programs, which are very successful. PGE is doing great work on virtual power plants, and it's time for us to really make that available to all of Oregon's ratepayers, making sure that we're rolling pilot projects out to more of a statewide level because they're successful at bringing down the load on our transmission and ideally reducing the ratepayers' need to invest in physical power plant construction. So really strategic, also make sure that we're investing strategically in things like solar, residential battery, electric vehicles. And I'm also going to be looking at inclusive utility investments, which are an affordability effort as well as a climate proposal. I work a lot on food waste, pollution, toxins in water and land, so I'll continue to do that work, as well as I serve on the task force for municipal solid waste in the Willamette Valley, and we're looking at solutions relative to preparing for the Coffin Butte landfill to be closed. Transportation is something that's on all of our minds. Representative Ricky Smith and I are fierce defenders of the 50-30-20, making sure that 50% of the bill of the funding for transportation comes back to our local counties and cities at that 20 and 30%. I'm going to continue to support solutions that include transportation solutions that include seismic improvements, rail, transit, making sure that we're investing in multimodal, including EV infrastructure. And the last slide here is just highlighting that during the interim, we're connecting with community. We're in district. We're not in Salem each day as often. I host monthly town halls and coffees, and my next event will be April 23rd at 10:30 at the Sherwood Community Center. So hope to see some of you there. Just a snapshot into my week. These are some of the events that I'll be attending. We've got a child care conversation relative to the potential closure of the Siemens Child Care Center. We have conversations around policy for education coming this week. My office and I will also be connecting with school board members and city councilors around the district. I'll be presenting some of the polluters pay policy concepts to the Just Transition Alliance tomorrow. And I'm so excited to be emceeing the Tigard Chamber Civics Bee. But then also policy work and professional development are a key part of our interim. And so I'll be attending the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators Conference as well as the Clean Energy Legislative Academy, and then touring Southern Oregon with other legislative colleagues. I want to thank everybody for all of your partnership in the session and really want to make sure that people feel comfortable reaching out to me in my office so that we can understand the local interests and policy and the local conversations. And I really just appreciate the opportunity tonight to present a little bit to you all. My email is here, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Representative Ricky Smith.
Wonderful, but looking at the time, I would say that my role is to be the closer. So I'm going to try to bring it home here very quickly. Number one, I want to say thank you to my colleague, Senator Neron Mislin, for a very thorough review of the work that we did in 33 days, according to Everett and Greg, and appreciated their recap as well. Things that the work for me, while this is considered a short session, for me it was actually my first long session because I came into the legislature the last 3 weeks of the long session. So I had an opportunity to fully experience a full legislative session. And I will say that my areas of focus and expertise were an education committee, on the economic development, small business and trade committee, and also in labor and workforce. And so I would just quickly highlight the areas that were of prime concern for me. Mayor, as you and I have discussed relative to ICE raids on school campuses and college campuses, proud to say that it was achieved House Bill 4079 and was able to support the carrier in the delivery of that bill. In addition, also wanted to address the threat of swatting, which many districts and communities experience, and supported House Bill 4151, which now creates a new felony if someone engages in that activity and someone is either seriously physically injured or has has a death as a result of that. In addition to public safety, I also carried the copper theft bill, which was House Bill 4140. That has an impact for cities and counties because copper right now is actually trading at a higher level than gold. And so we know that landlines that our seniors primarily and those that are out in rural areas depend upon for their access to 911 are being dug up and cut in hopes of stripping copper. We saw recently in Multnomah County and in Portland a sting operation that brought a copper ring to bear. And because of this legislation, now will face stiffer penalties for that activity. I will be expanding that work going into 27 session and working on a RICO statute that will actually get at the head of these rings that go after copper, endangering our cities and our counties and businesses. In addition, on the education side, I've had the privilege of working with the Oregon Department of Education relative to school accountability bill, and will continue that work. I also look forward to working on expanding the school year work task force, as well as dealing with school attendance issues. And we'll be discussing an opportunity potentially to have a conversation relative to class size and its impacts relative to how we best serve our children in our districts. Relative to the economic development, you've already heard about the investments made. I'm pleased to say that I've also had conversations with Congresswoman Salinas relative to her continued work on infrastructure and what bills I might be able to bring alongside that to further deepen and expand access for cities and counties to put more infrastructure into the ground. In addition to that, also supported the small business tariff, which gets back to refunding and supporting businesses that have been impacted by the federal tariffs. We know that small businesses are the backbones of our communities, and it is important that they be supported in that effort. And with that, we would entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Councilor Shevlin.
Just a comment, thank you, Senator Neron Mifflin and Representative Ricky Smith, for the work you do at the State House, but also in our region and specifically for Wilsonville. We so appreciate you knowing what we need, asking for what we need, having open lines of communication, and coming here tonight to let us know. You worked hard this last session, and I know you will continue to work hard for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Skoll.
I would also like to thank you. It's a lot going on there in a short period of time, and it's a lot to keep track of, and appreciate it very much in terms of what you're doing, taking care of us and taking care of the state, and there's lots of different moving parts there, and it's I'm sure it's difficult to keep track of, but good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Cunningham.
Mirror it. Thank you for your hard work, especially as mentioned before, the work on helping to keep local control. I know that during the long session, Senator Neron Mifflin, you also stood up for our rights here with the home rule and the ability to control our destiny as a city. And then during this short session, the work you all did on the bills with the housing to ensure that or to attempt to ensure. But keep up that fight for us. We appreciate it. We say it a lot here in this council chamber that we do expect to be able to control our destinies as a city, and your advocacy on that is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
With that, I'll say that I really appreciate working with both of you. I've never seen, I mentioned Greg Leo's text messages at 5 in the morning. I should say ditto to you two. The communication's been wonderful. The outreach, especially when citizens raise concerns, the outreach I've gotten from both of you in helping uplift our local concerns to the legislature and in Salem The amount of time and effort you come into our community and spend time with our citizens is amazing. And continue the fight. Thank you for your service, and I look forward for all of us working for you in many years down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to also return the thanks to you. You came to Salem so many times to testify on
Yeah.
behalf of Wilsonville, and it really does make a difference. And our Wilsonville team there, the delegation, the Mr. Wild and Mr. Leo and yourself showing up so many times, I think it really has helped, as somebody said, helped Wilsonville punch above its weight. So thank you for being there so often.
I would add to that point that my colleagues who have worked on the housing bills, particularly 4037, reached out to me directly and said, you know, I want you to know, heads up, we couldn't get what you wanted, so please vote and vote your conscience. So we will continue that good fight. It's earned me more than one trip to the governor's office, but I will continue to darken that door as many times as I need to on your behalf. So
Thank you very much for your presentation
Thank
tonight.
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Now, next up is citizens' input and community announcements. This is an opportunity for visitors to address the city council on any matter concerning city business or any matter over which the council has control. It is also the time to address items not on the agenda. It's also the time to address items that are on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff will make every effort to respond to questions raised during community input as quickly as possible following the council meeting. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please, when conveying your remarks, whatever they may be, please speak to the council as a whole and not directly to any one member of council during your comments. Also, please note you can use the podium or sit at the tables in the front of council, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. Please make sure you talk into the microphone at either location. To comment before council in person or virtually, you must sign up either by completing a speaker card at the side of the room or by using the raise hand feature in Zoom. You will need to provide your name, address, and topic you will be discussing. Information on engaging with City Council can be found on the City Council's webpage, wilsonvilleoregon.gov/City Council. As a reminder, when you begin your comments, state your name for the record and state your address, or state that your address is provided on the speaker card. Please note that this is not the only way to communicate with the council or myself. You are welcome to submit information in writing or via email. Additionally, I encourage you to schedule a meeting with me or any of the other councilors to discuss your concerns in person further. And with that, I'm going to call Sharon Kishner. Is she here? Okay. Doris Whaler.
Doris Whaler, and my information is on file. I remember when Wilsonville first created their development review boards. It was rather unique, at least in this area. It gave an opportunity for just everyday people to come and say what they thought about development in our town. So I'm sad to see that the state has now taken that away from us. I agree with Mayor O'Neill about notices on the website, but I also think there should be a column in the Boones Ferry Messenger, since everyone receives that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was a different kind of notice. I started my career as a legal secretary, so I was particularly interested in reading the brief about the city being sued by the owner of Fry's property. So my question, and maybe this should be addressed to the city attorney, is, was our policy to notify all the people within the town center loop an opportunity to address the zone change before the zone changes were made? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Yeah, probably maybe reach out by email.
That
and
would
then
be
we can
great.
have a follow-up. Thank you, Ms. Whaler.
That was the flaw I could see in their argument, so hopefully we did the proper notices.
Thank you. John Ledlow.
Hello, I'm John Ledlow, and you have all the information. Today I've come to talk to you about chairing meetings. I've chaired 600 meetings. This town, Planning Commission as mayor, and 4 years as the county chair. You know, what we did, and you can look back on it, is some would think, you know, have their opinions of me and how I might run meetings, but go back and look at them. Here's what I did. I gave free license to my commissioners to ask questions and answer questions as they will, because some of the commissioners were willing to tell those people who are pleading for an answer their answer. I know it's outrageous. The unmitigated audacity that a counselor or commissioner would talk directly to somebody testifying. These meetings, that 3 minutes, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for extending me an extra 40 seconds or 45 seconds last time, but these are really tight, you guys. I mean, 3 minutes, some people are so nervous they can't talk, and they stumble through it. I let people go. I had such phrases as, "Are you done yet? Can you finish the paragraph?" But we always let people go a little longer. Why? Why not? Who are we here to listen to? Consultants whom we praise? Or volunteers that come up and spend their time here, their good, precious time, unpaid time, to give you advice? And some of it's good advice. I've never heard from that side of the pulpit about what a good job somebody did testifying, unless they're a really good friend, winky, winky. But, you know, it's just crazy to me that nobody answers any questions. They ask plenty of questions. Nobody answers them ever. It's quiet up. It's no birds singing up here, you guys, and you continue doing it. It's really embarrassing to other people. Look around. You'll see a lot of cities and commissions, county commissions, saying, yeah, I want to talk some more about that. You know, we're not going to put it on our county administrator or city manager. We're going to answer some of those questions ourselves. What a crazy idea. I would just ask you to change some of the policies here. They're way too tight. I don't know what kind of side agreements you have where, well, we don't ask those kind of questions. We all agree to advance. Well, agree to advance on your rules as you wish, but give the public what they deserve, and that's time. Thank you.
Tristan Rowland.
My name is Tristan Rowland, and my information is on file. I'm here to speak on Measure 3-632, which will be on the May ballot. I'd like to preface by saying that I understand that urban renewal does have bad connotations. It has been used by many large urban areas and planning agencies as a tool for gentrification. And but I would suggest that it must be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So yes, there have been some cases where it's been really bad, but some cases where it's greatly improved communities. I would argue that Wilsonville is one of them, and will be one of them as we continue, as we hopefully continue urban renewal. As planned, it will help build new developments that include low-income housing and housing for seniors, help improve and maintain infrastructure, and attract businesses to support the Wilsonville economy, basically increasing the development of the city. Next, I would like to discuss the impacts of the proposed measure. First, plainly, it will limit growth in Wilsonville. It's costly. would force automatic new votes every time there's a change to the urban renewal plan, thus costing tax, including taxpayer money to fund those elections. It would put us on track for higher taxes despite what the proposal says, new development in the urban renewal plan helps pay for infrastructures and improvements. This amendment to the charter will likely lead to lawsuits, which would also be costly. And I would also like to emphasize that when most citizens of Wilsonville will be looking at whether to vote for this measure or not, they will not see the words of the measure on the ballot or on the voter's pamphlet. So they won't even know what they're voting for or against. And I sometimes like to examine the social media community in Wilsonville, but I try not to engage in it. But I'm seeing a whole lot of NIMBY again. I know I bring it up a lot, but it's a whole lot of, we want to improve things in the city, but not in my backyard. No low-income housing in my backyard, none of this development. And I'm hearing from the people proposing this, I'm not hearing any alternative to the urban renewal plan. I'm mostly hearing opposition, but with no alternative. So I'm just here to strongly encourage citizens to vote against this measure, as it will be a barrier to progress in Wilsonville. Thank you.
Christie, Mayor.
Can I take the chair?
Yes, please.
My name is Chris Mayer. My information is on the card. It's been a wicked, crazy week. Most people here know me, but they probably don't know much about me. I was born in Detroit and raised in Massachusetts, schooled in Boston. New England is in my heart, but Wilsonville, Oregon is my home. New Englanders have a reputation. We laugh a little too loud, and we use language that's a little too colorful. We're fighters. But why do we fight? We're not instigators. We learned that lesson real young. I think it's because we're fiercely loyal people. Loyal to our families, loyal to our friends, loyal to our neighbors, to our home team and our hometown. Almost a year ago, I was in my garden, attending my azaleas when I learned about the proposed charter amendment that would later become ballot measure 3-632. It was badly written and could harm our neighborhoods, businesses, and our schools. It could lead to higher taxes or more empty parking lots. I felt that urge to fight. I came to City Hall and I gave my first ever public testimony. What I learned from sticking my neck out almost a year ago is that loyalty, that fire, that fight, isn't geographically dependent. It lives in certain people. Maybe it's how our moms raised us, or how our teachers mentored us, or just playground rules. But through this fight, I have met hundreds of good people in Wilsonville. People with fire, people with fight. These people are not fighting for themselves. They're fighting for each other, they're fighting for you, and they're fighting for me. If this measure passes, it will hurt Wilsonville. It will hurt our beautiful Tree City with its rich Boone Ferry history, its top-tier schools, award-winning neighborhoods, and parks that draw visitors from Portland to Salem. A city that can't take care of itself will decline. You might not notice it tomorrow, but it will come faster than you think. I'm just one lady who hasn't tended her azaleas in a year. I need help with this. Please think of one person you care about in this city. When you get home tonight, ask them to vote no on Measure 3-632. If they can't vote, tell them about our campaign. If you're a fighter too, and you think this measure is just a bunch of shenanigans dressed up as voter rights, come find us. We are Wilsonville United. That's my time. Thank you.
Susan Reed.
My name is Susan Reep, and my information's on record, and I'm going to talk about a tree. I wish I was going to talk about something a lot more fiery, because that was wonderful. But we're a tree city, and I thought I would just mention that there is one really fantastic tree that everyone should go see before it gets its leaves and you can't see its structure. Every time I go down that street that I'm not sure what the name it is, I think it's Parkway, when you go past Al's nursery before you get to that church, you're headed towards Target or Costco, there is a beautiful tree on the left, just beautiful structure. And if you're looking, you just can't miss it. And it's just worth going to look at. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Valise, is there, I got a note, is there someone online?
The online speaker card for David, he's no longer wishing to speak.
Understood, but there was also a online speaker Carol note underneath. Is that something relevant? At the
Sorry,
bottom?
just, it's my handwriting that's bad.
Oh, is that
Card.
card? Oh, okay. I misread. Thank you. All right. Chris Heidelman. Thought that was an O&L. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Chris Heidemann. My info is on file. So, should the Wilsonville Charter be amended to require voter approval of urban renewal plans? Well, of course, voters should have a say. Simple, right? But as usual, the pain is in the details. Details that those voting on this modification to our city's charter will almost certainly never see. Here's what will show up on the ballot and in the voter handbook, and this is the whole text of the actual initiative, right? Nobody is going to read this whole thing because it's not typically available. To start with, the amendment defines substantial change as any change that expands the boundary, duration, borrowing, or spending authority of any plans or alters the basic purpose, engineering, or financial principles of a voter-approved plan. Any change in all of that is substantial. So if engineers determine that the boundary needs to expand a few feet to access or improve infrastructure, say an electrical or water hookup, then that's substantial. The amendment does say any change. Any change that alters the engineering is substantial. Engineering designs, surveys, specifications and drawings, changes in materials, the measure doesn't specify. Suppose that in late fall of an even-numbered year, engineers determine that a planned road needs to go not over there, but over here. Engineering change, right? Any engineering change, and so substantial. Well, the November election just passed, so now we need to wait a year and a half, 18 months for voters to approve the substantial change at the next even-numbered primary. What about changes that are not substantial? I can't imagine what those are, given that any change in all those categories is substantial. For those, the amendment requires that we all wait around for 90 days, just in case 5% of Wilsonville's registered voters, so maybe 800 people, call for an election. And if that happens in the late fall of an even-numbered year, again, we're waiting around 18 months for voters to approve the not substantial change. So should voters have a say in how improvements to our city are financed? Absolutely, but it is not this measure. Any change in the categories I have mentioned requires a vote, and potentially an 18-month period where we're all sitting on our hands waiting for that vote. The effect of this measure will not be to require voter approval of urban renewal plans. No, what it does is create insurmountable roadblocks to using urban renewal to address blight in Wilsonville. The only other path is bonds, which have the unhappy effect of immediately raising all our already high property taxes. This measure is for you if you want to enjoy the empty Sherry's, you want to look at the empty fries forever, you want to look at the empty movie theater, or if you'd like your property taxes to go up. Then it's for you. Please, please, for a better Wilsonville, vote no on voter approval of urban renewal plans. Thank you.
Mary Rooney.
My name is Mary Rooney, and my address is on the speaker card. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to speak. The term substantial amendment was brought up during the work session, so I felt the need to speak on that as it relates, or doesn't relate, to 3-632. To better grasp some of the amendment language, it's helpful to understand the framework for urban renewal plans when they are subjected to changes. Depending on the size and scope of an urban renewal plan change, there are 3 types of recognized amendments. These are substantial amendments, minor amendments, and major/council-approved amendments. Substantial amendments are defined in ORS 457.085 and by law are required to be included in urban renewal plans. To summarize, definitions for substantial amendments include A, adding specified amount of land to the urban renewal area, and B, increasing the maximum amount of indebtedness. These amendments are a big deal and must undergo the same notification, reporting, and approval process as the original plan. The other 2 types of recognized amendments are minor amendments and major/council-approved amendments. These are recognized by the Oregon Economic Development Association. A quick look at urban renewal plans across Oregon revealed that the plans surveyed included substantial amendments and often minor amendments and major/council-approved amendments. Each type of amendment had criteria and a specific path for completion, such as through urban renewal agency resolution or city council ordinance. The proposed charter amendment for 3-632, however, doesn't mention the 3 types of recognized amendments. In fact, it uses the term substantial change and also non-substantial change. A substantial change would trigger a vote of the electorate limited to a primary or general election and is defined in the amendment as any change proposed to be made to an existing urban renewal plan that A, expounds the boundary, duration, borrowing, or spending authority of any plan, or B, alters the basic purpose, engineering, or financing principles of a voter-approved plan. That is not the same definition as a substantial amendment. This term is broad and vague and incorporates various actions or decisions of an urban renewal agency as it relates to urban renewal plans. Adopting this language into our charter could upend a clear and legal process through which our city accesses urban renewal. This exact proposed substantial change term isn't the same as the state law definition of substantial amendment, and yet I have yet to find a precedent anywhere else in Oregon that it is written into their city or county's constitution. Where is the wisdom in adopting this into our city's charter without fully understanding the impact? The proposed charter amendment for Measure 3-632 is risky and will be costly for the city to clarify if it is ever to access urban renewal again. Ultimately, this will cost us, the taxpayers, too. Voters should be aware of what is at stake and protect their investments in the city by outright rejecting this misguided proposal in May. Thank you.
Rick Wallace.
Hello, my name is Rick Wallace. My address is on the speaker card, and I want to say happy Monday and happy spring. It was a beautiful day today. I biked here in flip-flops, and it was 70 degrees. But I'm here to say that I'm in favor of the town center plan that we have and would really like to see progress on that. I was in favor of the plan back in 2024 when we voted on urban renewal. And even though the advisory vote lost by 50 votes, I was one of more than 3,000 residents that voted yes on urban renewal and a thriving town center as it was in the plan back then. That is why I oppose this measure 3-632 now. It claims to fix a problem of not having the right to vote, but we've always had the right to vote. It claims to fix the problem of us not having enough information to vote, but the information that it requires the city to fill its pamphlet statement with has always been a public record and easily available on the city's website. We all know that you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. This measure is trying to use a 900-word, 2-page block, or peg, to fill a hole that has never existed. So while I appreciate the efforts of my neighbors, the petitioners and advocates of this measure, I strongly ask everyone to vote no on this upcoming measure. Let's move forward with voting on urban renewal as we've always have, and finally make progress on our hopefully soon-to-be beautiful town center. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call this name one more time, Sharon Kishner. Okay. Turning now to Counselor, is there anybody online? Okay. Now turning to Counselor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements. Counselor Cunningham.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief tonight, but I wanted to wish everyone a happy Easter season for those who are celebrating. Also, those who celebrated Lent, good job. Made it to the finish line, 40 days. Again, thanks again tonight to our state legislators for coming and speaking, delivering their report to council, as well as city staff and Mr. Greg Leo for their reports on what's going on with the state legislation, or the state legislature. All those things, you know, they're little things, but they impact us. I think it was mentioned earlier, the death by the 1,000 cuts. That Mr. Leo mentioned, that we don't lose our control of our city overnight. We lose it through tiny, small, incremental changes in codes. If anybody watched the work session, even codes as ridiculous as moderating the maximum distance that we are allowed to communicate with our citizens about a change in their community. That one, I can't get past that one. You know, give us the minimum and let us go from there, but to give us a maximum and say you're not allowed to communicate with your citizens past this line, that irks me a little bit. So, again, thank you for the fight in Salem and trying to keep those local controls in place. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Shevlin.
Thank you. I'm going to make a few comments about some upcoming events in our city, and then I'm going to provide some personal comments about an issue that is of concern to me. First of all, April 25th is Work Day. That's WERK, which stands for Wilsonville Environmental Resource Keepers. This is a day, it's Saturday, April 25th, where we ask the community to come together to support our parks and getting things cleaned up in preparation for a busy summer season. Past projects have included painting soccer goals and picnic tables, bark chipping trails, and removing ivy and other invasive species. Again, Workday is Saturday, April 25th. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning with a complimentary breakfast from our Rotary Club at the community center. Who doesn't like a free breakfast? After our tummies are full, we will head on over to Memorial Park, where we can get some direction in how we can help get our parks ready. A highlight that day will be some goats. Now, who doesn't like to pet a goat? Bring the kids, bring the grandkids. These goats are special because when they are there on Saturday, April 25th, they will have already completed their work for Work Day, and that is they will be munching away at ivy and other invasive species in order to get our parks ready. So please join us. If you'd like more information, you may visit wilsonvilleparksandrec.com, go to the events tab and choose Work Day, WERK, for a little bit of WORK. Also, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee has posted their calendar for the month of April. April is Deaf Heritage Month. April is also Arab American Heritage Month. And lastly, as Mayor mentioned, Passover, which began on April 1st and extends through April 9th. Now for my personal comments. I'd like to speak this evening about something important for the future of Wilsonville, how we plan, grow, and take care of our community. One of the things that makes Wilsonville special is that we've always been thoughtful about growth. We've made decisions that support our neighborhoods, our local businesses, and the future opportunities that we hope to create. And just as importantly, we've kept the flexibility to adapt as our city's needs change. I've been thinking about this, not just as a counselor, but as a citizen who will be voting in the upcoming primary on May 19th. This evening, you have already heard others speak about Measure 3-632. In simple terms, this measure would change Wilsonville's charter to add new restrictions on how the city can use urban renewal, or if it can be used as a finance tool for special projects. And I'll be honest, it's a complicated measure. So let's take a step back and talk about what that actually means. Urban renewal, of course, is a tool that Wilsonville has used for decades to fund improvements in specific areas of our city without creating new taxes or increasing tax rates. It's helped us invest in things that improve everyday life. Things like our city parks and the water features that so many families enjoy. It's helped us build this building, City Hall, and it's helped us build our neighborhoods and support our schools. These are the kind of investments that make a real difference, and often ones that we don't think about because they're just behind the scenes, but they make what Wilsonville is such a great place to live. Just as important, Wilsonville has a strong track record of using this tool responsibly. We follow state law. We have a transparent public process. And historically, we've gone a step further by asking for extra community input along the way. Put simply, nothing is broken. Yet the wording in favor of this ballot measure would have you believe that things are indeed broken. Most other cities in Oregon follow the state's framework for urban renewal the same as we do. A few other cities have tried adding conditions and then later found out that those didn't work and they had to go back and fix them. So what will this measure do? It would add new, unusually complex restrictions that make it harder for the city to use the tool effectively. It creates additional hurdles that reduce our ability to respond when opportunities come along. And that means when a city loses its flexibility, projects can slow down, as we've heard from other testimony, opportunities can be missed, and over time, those delays can will lead to higher costs, including increased pressure on taxpayers. You're careful with how you spend your money, as am I. None of us wants to spend unnecessarily. I've heard some people say the measure is about giving residents a stronger voice in these decisions. I agree. People must have a voice. But in Wilsonville, we already do, and we do it better than most with additional layers of public input in place. We have a transparent process. We have community participation. And you elect local leaders to make thoughtful decisions on your behalf. At the end of the day, this comes down to a simple question. Do we want to add heavy restrictions to a system that already works well? From my perspective, this measure is expensive and inefficient. It introduces risk, increases costs, and slows down the kind of progress that has helped Wilsonville thrive. I've taken a close look at the facts and the history of the Town Center Plan. It was developed through extensive community engagement. Today's council is continuing that work as we consider adjustments to building heights and housing. That kind of responsiveness is exactly how local leadership should work. We've taken community input seriously, and we're looking at adjustments to bring your vision of our town center, all of us, to fruition. Adding new restrictions at this stage doesn't improve the process. It risks delaying progress and sidelining the work this community has already done to move the town center forward. That's why I believe this measure is a step in the wrong direction. The town center plan is for the residents and by the residents. Voting no on this measure is a way of protecting the time, energy, and financial investments that you, our residents, have already put forward. I encourage you, the wise citizens of Wilsonville, to vote no on Measure 3-632. Thank you.
Councilor Skull.
Thank you. Counselor Shevlin, well said, great words. I will submit my public schedule for the record here after my talk. It's kind of hard to follow up with that. One thing I wanted to highlight is I did get to visit the PGA Integrated Operations Center in Tualatin. It was a great place, very fascinating. If you're into NASA type stuff, it was pretty neat to see. Or they buy power, they distribute power, and they service the system real time. On from that, just attended several meetings throughout the last couple weeks. This past Saturday was a joyous tradition in Wilsonville, the annual egg hunt in Memorial Park. Kids from 1 to 11 clambered all over 18,000 candy and prize-filled eggs. Many thanks to our Parks and Recreations team. They did an outstanding job for putting together this great event. And a special thanks to our gold sponsor, Nicholas Family Agency, for their support. It was a great event, was there for most of it, and I bet there was probably 1,000 people, if not a little more, so it was fun. Other events, let's see, every 2 years, the city of Wilsonville is part of a national community survey called the NCS. Over 500 communities nationwide participate in the professionally managed and statistically valid survey. The 2026 NCS, administered by Polco, is now underway. The survey asks residents their opinions on city amenities, services, community needs, civic participation, and other topics. The data helps show how Wilsonville is performing compared to both our prior results and other cities, and helps the city to understand what is important to residents and how that changes over time. Public participation in this survey is welcome. It's open until April 15th. And you can find the survey on the city's website at wilsonvilleoregon.gov/2026 survey. And I took the survey today, and it doesn't take that long. It's a good survey, and it's very comprehensive. Spring events at the library, upcoming events. If you're looking for something to do with the kids, an affordable date night, or just to mix up your routine, the Wilsonville Public Library is offering a number of events and activities this spring, including the continuation of the Book Notes concert, a series of performances by local musicians, music and movement classes for children under 7 and younger, beginning birding for families, an informative talk about the history of Japanese Americans in Oregon as a part of the One Book, One Coast program, where the West Coast creates a giant book club, I'm assuming online, by reading George Takei's graphic novel, They Called Us Enemy. So that will be coming up here, and more. So to find details, please reference the city council calendar, wilsonvilleoregon.gov/calendar at the library webpage. And that's all I have.
Thank you. The next item is our consent agenda. Will the city attorney please read the items on consent?
Resolution number 3239, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing acquisition of property related to construction of the Beckman Creek Flow Mitigation Project, CIP numbers 7068, and amending resolutions numbers 3167 and 3223. Resolution number 3254, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with Turney Excavating, Inc. for the annual pedestrian enhancements project, capital improvement project number 4717. Resolution number 3255, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute easements concerning certain infrastructure relating to the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission's water intake facilities. Resolution number 3259, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute goods and services contract with Trojan Technologies for procurement of ultraviolet disinfection equipment as part of the wastewater treatment plant backup ultraviolet system replacement project, capital improvement project 2109. Resolution number 3261, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Dow LLC for the Willamette Water Supply PLM 1.3 construction inspection of city infrastructure project, capital improvement and project number 1127, and minutes of the March 12th, 16th, and 2026 City Council meetings.
Thank you. Councilor Shevlin, can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0. Next, we turn to new business. The next item is resolution number 3260. I will turn it over to our city attorney, Amanda Guile-Hinman, to discuss that.
So this is resolution number 3260, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville establishing graffiti abatement programs. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, Amanda Guile-Hinman, City Attorney. So tonight for Council's consideration is resolution number 3260, which is concerning graffiti abatement programs. As an agenda for tonight's discussion, I'm just going to give a very brief overview. I know we've all heard this a few times in some work sessions. So a brief overview of the council goals, some background on this particular project, and then the proposed programs that are included with Resolution 3260, particularly the graffiti tip rewards program, the removal subsidization program, and the removal loaner kits. So the question for council consideration tonight is whether to adopt Resolution 3260. So by way of background, and I know council's well aware of this, is council goal number 2 is around public safety. The first outcome within goal 2 is to streamline response to code enforcement challenges. And to achieve this outcome, strategy 2.4 calls for the city to investigate developing a graffiti enforcement/reward program. So while the strategy specifically looked at an enforcement or reward program, as we worked as a staff and with council, we looked at not only a rewards program, but some additional opportunities for property owners in particular on how to address graffiti that occurs on private property. So we've talked about this a few times in work session, the last one being on the March 2nd work session, where we looked at 4 programs. The 4th program, council elected not to move forward with as a full-blown program, which is the volunteer program. Instead, we discussed potentially an ad hoc option if there's a significant tagging event that occurs, or if there's a particular community group who might want to do that as a project. For this particular strategy, for this particular program review, we've looked at several different jurisdictions, both within the state of Oregon and outside the state of Oregon, to get some inspiration for the program language. We've also looked at other city programs, so in particular, the subsidization program is modeled after our sidewalk subsidization program. And there's been significant interdepartmental discussions. I want to give a big thanks to our administration, code enforcement, law enforcement, Parks and Recreation, and Public Works, who have all been really involved in this discussion on these programs. So getting into the proposed programs, the first is the TIPS Reward Program. What we've set up that's included in this Resolution 3260 is a standard $250 reward for people who provide a report of vandalism to our law enforcement. It does need to lead to an arrest of either a graffiti charge or having the materials associated with graffiti. Based on council discussion, we've included some additional language, too, that I want to highlight here. First is that if the graffiti isn't to the point of causing damage of a value of $250, it's basically the lesser of $250 or the cost of the damage. But we also have the flexibility for the city to offer a higher reward, particularly if there's an event that is significant damage, and particularly if we might be able to get some restitution as part of that criminal charge. So there's some flexibility, some parameters put around that. To access this rewards program, an individual needs to provide information that leads to the arrest, and they have to file a claim for the reward within 90 days. We already have a web page on our city website dedicated to graffiti reporting, so we are going to be adding a form that somebody can fill out to claim the reward on that on the city's website. So there will be additional information, assuming council adoption, there will be additional information that will be added to that webpage. The next program is the graffiti subsidization program, and like I mentioned, this is modeled generally after our sidewalk program. So there's basically two different types of subsidization that somebody can apply for. They can either seek a partial subsidization of any materials that they have to buy to address graffiti on their property, or if they have to pay a professional to remove the graffiti, they can get some subsidy for that. And like I mentioned again, it's modeled at the same thresholds and percentages of the subsidy is the exact same as what we have in our sidewalk program. And then the final program is our removal loaner kits. So what this looks at is basically it's a bucket that has several different types of cleaning supplies in it based on the type of material that the graffiti is on. So if it's metal versus another type of brick or something like that, that an individual can check out that kit from, and right now we're working on the logistics of will it be housed at Public Works or Parks and Rec or both. But basically they can check out a loaner kit, they can go utilize it to clean up the graffiti, and then they bring it back. These are relatively low cost, so it's a really good tool that the city can pay for and the community can use, and it's not a significant funding cost to the city. So those are the three programs at a very high level. We've had a lot of discussions about them in the past. So the question for council tonight is whether to adopt resolution number 3260, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time.
Anybody on council have questions? Councilor Shevlin?
Just a comment, I believe it was last March of 25, when we chose this as one of our goals, and you've done a very nice job keeping this in front of us. We knew it wasn't dormant. You worked on it, brought back ideas, listened to us, and incorporated them. I'm in full support of the work that you've done, and I think you've done a very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you. If as other people are maybe looking to press their buttons, I failed to thank, and I really do need to thank my legal team, both Tobin Montalvo and Hannah Young. The main reason this has stayed in front of you is probably because of them. So I really appreciate all of their hard work on this, and I'm really thankful that they got that. They're both students, so what a great opportunity for them to work on a city policy that's hopefully going to be passed tonight.
Councilor Cunningham.
Yeah, I would echo the thanks also to Tobin and Hannah. Great work on this by all parties involved. I'm very pleased to have this program being put in place. It's always reactive when we're dealing with with graffiti, but this is a proactive approach to being prepared for that so that we can give our citizens the tools they need to keep our city beautiful and, just knock that stuff down when it happens so that it hopefully diverts it from occurring in the future. So I'm very pleased with this, and thank you and all the departments for all their work, especially Tobin and Hannah.
Thank you.
Counselor Skull.
Double echo the thank you. Excellent job. And I was late to the party here, but it was nice to see. It's nice to see that there's a process there, top to bottom, to identify this and then basically mitigate it in a fast fashion. And hopefully this will promote the community to kind of keep an eye on things and make it a habit. But thanks to the whole team.
Thank you.
Well, going last, there's nothing more I can add other than this. I thought, based on your efforts and your team, that we as a council had very thoughtful discussions. And it's kind of pleasant to have a conversation on something that we all resonated around, but thanks to your help. And I'm in favor of supporting this tonight. But thank you for your efforts and your team.
Thank you, Mayor.
With that, Councilor Skull, can I have a motion to approve resolution number 3260, establishing the City of Wilsonville's graffiti abatement programs?
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 3260, resolution for the City of Wilsonville establishing a graffiti abatement program.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Turning to city manager business.
I have nothing this evening. No, thank you for my first council meeting. Like I've told you all before, I look forward to this. It's been a long night. I look forward to this opportunity and to working with all of you as well as our community members. So thank you again. And it's not too long of a night, I guess.
Yeah.
I expected at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Legal business.
I was going to say, do you need me to prolong it for an hour and a half? I could.
Please don't, Amanda.
Okay, nothing tonight, Mayor.
All right. The city council is adjourned at 8:32 p.m.